Hey guys, welcome to part 1 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by Iruka. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 1. A New Beginning. Naruto again. Iruka's grimace seemed particularly severe as he squinted against the light from the morning sun. It wasn't as if these events had gotten worse, but their frequency appeared to have spiked dramatically in recent weeks. And where is he now? Laughing like a madman and leading a few jonin on a chase through town, Mizuki sighed, shaking his head. Why the Sandaime allows him to continue living in the village is beyond me. He's a nuisance, discounting simply what he is. There had been a significant pause in the man's statement that Iruka hadn't failed to pick up on. But then, many of the villagers and shinobi of Konoha had similar feelings about Uzumaki Naruto. If his fate had been left in their hands, he would not have survived past the day of his birth. Both instructors were standing at the base of the Hokage's tower. If it had been a normal morning, most of the citizens would be bustling by on their way to this or that, perhaps nodding respectfully to the two chunin. Instead, a small crowd was gathered just behind the pair, and they did little to hide their gawking and angry muttering. The object of every person's attention was a large swath of graffiti, which depicted crude representations of the Sandaime and a handful of senior staff. Calling the images rude would be the understatement of the century. Even Iruka had to admit that it would be hard to pin this prank on anybody other than the Uzumaki boy. As the onlookers turned into an increasingly outraged rabble, the scarred chunin closed his eyes, thinking back on the words the Hokage had recently imparted. Iruka. Naruto grew up without knowing the love of a parent, and for so long he has been treated poorly because of his birthright. He has to pull those pranks to get attention. Whatever the form, he wants somebody to recognize his existence. Iruka ground his teeth, turning on the crowd with a sharp look that quieted even the most disgruntled onlooker. The situation is being handled. Please return to your duties. It was a slow dispersal, but at least they all left without making a scene. Mizuki glanced at him with a quirked eyebrow before shaking his head and sidling off towards the academy building. Iruka stared up at the mural for a long moment, considering his leader's words again. He had been struggling with a difficult decision for weeks, but it seemed that he had finally stumbled upon an answer. With a sigh he turned and leapt onto the nearest building, making his way towards where he knew Naruto would be hiding. It had taken a few minutes, but Naruto had successfully evaded his pursuers and now sat lounging against a tree with a cheeky grin on his face. The youth was average in many ways, although his height was nothing to be jealous of. One might even consider the 6-year-old cute if they could look past arguably ridiculous green aviator goggles on his forehead, or the whisker-like scars on his cheeks. But that was all anybody ever saw. When they looked at Naruto, it was the Kyuubi no Kitsune that forced its way into their minds. To them, Naruto was a haunting reminder from a dark past. The amiable blonde, however, knew nothing of this history. All he knew was that the villagers hated him. His smile faltered and faded as the citizens came back to his mind. The previously elated expression soured as he pouted to himself in a low mumble. Not my fault they don't like my artwork. Jerks. It was difficult for him to grapple with emotions and deal with hardships in life that most people barely even considered. He had been an orphan from birth, so he had been told, and no one in the village had been willing to take him in. The Sandaime had set him up with an apartment and a weekly stipend after the orphanage had removed him from its care. Apart from the Hokage, who obviously had very little time to spend with Naruto in the first place, there was only one other person that had ever expressed a benign interest in him. Iruka-sensei. The thought came as the man in question appeared in front of him, arms folded and looking cross. Iruka was not actually Naruto's teacher, but for better or worse the child seemed to have adopted him as a loose relative after being shown only a modicum of kindness. Oh, hey Iruka-sensei, he chimed, with only a small amount of pink coming to his face to indicate any embarrassment at being caught. His sole role model's petulant look told him that a lecture was coming. Naruto, this is the third incident this week, and one of your worst to date. What were you thinking when you decided to publicly insult the Hokage, who has shown you nothing but good intentions your whole life? Nothing was said about the other members included in the graffiti. Iruka knew the reaction he would get simply by mentioning the old man. If your dream is to become the best Hokage that Konoha has ever seen, why would you do such a thing? Why, Naruto? He knew what answer that he'd get, but he wanted to hear the boy to say it. It's funny seeing the villagers react, he grumbled, pouting and averting his eyes from Iruka's chastising gaze. A quick glance back showed the Chunin raising eyebrow, as if to say, is that all? Naruto sighed, folding his arms. I don't know. The response was honest. Iruka knew. How was a 6-year-old supposed to explain that his actions were meant to instigate a reaction from people in order to garner attention? The Sandame's words echoed again in the man's mind. With a tired exhale, Iruka stepped over to the broad tree trunk, sliding down it to settle next to the troublemaker. Look, Naruto, he began, staring up at the summer sky. I know you want the village to recognize you, or at the very least not spurn you at every turn. The questioning look in the boy's eyes elicited a fond eye roll. To not hate you, I mean. The blonde's grimace returned swiftly at the more explicit term. The question was coming. He could see the words forming on Naruto's lips, and he held up a hand. I've told you already. I can't tell you why they do, at least not beyond saying that they're foolish. Anyway, as I was saying, this isn't the way to go about getting people to acknowledge you. You want to become a ninja, right? The boy's vigorous nodding only confirmed his passion. And you know that to become Hokage you have to be a really strong ninja, right? Another nod. Then why not focus all of this energy you seem to have on training instead? Pick up a kunai or a few shuriken and do some target practice, try some sparring, or go to the library and... Naruto's features had gotten darker and darker as his mentor continued, until finally he was simply staring at the ground. Iruka stopped, hesitant to inquire. The boy saved him the trouble. Iruka-sensei, none of the stores will sell me any ninja stuff. I can only practice my taijutsu on the wooden training posts, and the library is always closed. The Chunin had to bite his tongue to keep himself from commenting on the last note. The library was never closed, but the keepers obviously felt the same as the shop owners did. It was hard to look at the downtrodden orphan, the child that should have been revered by all, reduced to the village prankster because of unreasonable cruelty. Iruka stamped down the righteous anger building in his chest before continuing. I want to ask you something, Naruto, he began hesitantly, not sure if even he was ready for what was about to leave his mouth. The somber blonde looked up questioningly, the rims of his eyes shimmering with unshed tears of frustration. It was hard to look into those blue eyes and see the little boy inside instead of the demon fox that had killed Iruka's parents. But that was the difference between the Chunin and most of the village. He knew that Naruto was a normal child, simply suffering from the refusal of his whole world to accept him, and all because of something that was outside of his own control. Would you like to come live with me? The silence that followed was deafening. Naruto's eyes widened, narrowed suspiciously like he was expecting some kind of trick, then widened again when he realized that the man was serious. After lacking a response for a few moments, Iruka coughed and continued a bit awkwardly. I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to. I know you don't like having supervision, and you probably don't want an adult looking over your shoulder constantly, and... Quote. He trailed off lamely, rubbing the back of his neck. Naruto seemed to be even more upset now, his face contorted with tears beginning to escape down his scarred cheeks. Iruka nearly apologized and retracted the offer when the small boy gripped his sleeve tightly. No response was given in words. The huge, ridiculous smile and unchecked tears streaming down his face were answers enough. It took a while for Naruto to get himself together enough to talk again, but once he did, his exuberance was palpable. Iruka understood more than most what not having parents meant for a child growing up. The poor boy's reaction only confirmed what he had learned on his own. More than anything else, Naruto wanted a family, somewhere he could be appreciated just for being himself. It may not be everything a normal child had, but for Konoha's pariah, the boy shunned from birth, it was the world. I'll do my best, Yondaime, to see your son become the man you would have wanted him to be. ****. If gossip were a sport, the citizens of Konoha would likely be the best in the world. Their whispers naturally frequented topics involving Naruto, although recently for reasons other than his unmentionable heritage and history. Rumor had it that an academy instructor had adopted the boy, one Yumino Iruka. Of course, while in a normal society the charitable act of adoption might raise a person's status to some degree, this was a special case. The adoptee was Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Almost overnight Iruka became the talking point of the village, and almost as quickly began drawing the same looks his new house guest always garnered. At first he would glare back, but when Naruto started mimicking the action he decided a change of tactics was necessary. Instead, he smiled, and slowly the boy began smiling as well. Naruto's was more of a defiant smirk, but it was better than the alternative. To say Naruto's illicit activities ceased immediately would be twisting the truth. The problem was, as Iruka quickly learned, that no structure had ever been introduced into his life. There were no consequences for his offenses, no praise for his accomplishments, and worst of all nobody to tell him the reasons behind anything. The first few weeks were some of the hardest the Chunin had ever experienced. Iruka was a teacher, although a fairly new one, and had some experience with kids. But being an instructor was a far stretch from acting as a parent. It took many hours speaking to the Hokage and discreetly asking the advice from unbiased parties to finally come up with a solution that worked. Even then, it took nearly a month to see marked improvement in behavior. But there it was. Uzumaki Naruto, renowned thorn in the side of Konoha, was improving. Through simply being consistent with punishments and criticisms, as well as always recognizing and praising his accomplishments, slowly but surely he stopped acting out. About a month and a half after Naruto had moved into Iruka's apartment, they were sitting together and having a one-sided discussion on table manners. Iruka could tell he wasn't so much being ignored as Naruto had started to think of something else that had been on his mind. Living together for a while had given the shinobi a better grasp of how the boy's mind worked. What is it, Naruto? You seem distracted by something. Anyo, Iruka-sensei. He asked uncomfortably, shifting around a few bits of rice with his chopsticks. Another marked change Iruka had been thankful to see was that Naruto seemed to think a lot more before something burst from his mouth unfiltered. He had not opened up much, but the boy dwelled on things to a greater extent than Iruka had thought. You said that I should, focus my energies on being a great ninja, right? He stopped for a moment at the man's nod. Well, I was just thinking, 'cause, most kids start at the academy at my age. I was just wondering. He repeated with failing confidence, looking down at his food. I already put in your paperwork, Iruka grinned, knowing where the question was leading. You'll be starting at the academy after the summer session is concluded. He had wanted to keep it as a surprise for later, but now was as good a time as any other to tell him. The way Naruto's face lit up was a memory he was likely to keep for years to come. There was no need to tell the ecstatic prospective genin the pains he had gone through to allow him admittance to the Ninja Academy. The Hokage had personally pulled some strings for it to happen, for which Iruka had been extremely grateful. He was frustrated that such a thing had to be done, though. Most of the administrators had refused to cooperate, forcing the Sandame's hand. We're going to start training next week, all right. But I thought I was going to the academy to learn things and train, Naruto wondered aloud. That was, Iruka supposed, a logical conclusion, but it simply wasn't what was expected. Naruto, I know you've tried to practice on your own, but you'll need to be a little more prepared. Training to become a shinobi takes serious work and dedication, and you can bet your classmates will have received some sort of training from their families before getting to the academy. A scowl that began to deteriorate into a dejected frown prompted Iruka to continue quickly. And so, I need to make sure you're up to speed so you can make a good impression. Are you willing to train hard to become Hokage one day? The vigorous nod at mention of his dream seemed sincere. Iruka felt a little guilty using the child's aspirations as fuel for his passion, but if it got him motivated then there didn't seem to be any harm in it. The next month rivaled the first in its difficulties. Even though Iruka spent hours explaining and demonstrating the simplest jutsu, his protege couldn't seem to mold chakra correctly. As he was beginning to doubt that the boy could even become a ninja, the answer to his problems came in an unexpected manner. One uneventful afternoon when Iruka was attempting to explain the chakra control necessary to create a bunshin, Naruto threw his version of a tantrum, sighing loudly and falling into the grass on his back. Ugh. Iruka-sensei. I can't concentrate like that. You said I just need to mold the chakra and stuff, but how? It's like trying to grab one tiny ant from a big group that's all running together. His frustrated noises quickly devolved into him simply grumbling on the ground. The statement struck Iruka with a flash of inspiration, however. It was just a theory, but he was willing to try anything at this point. For some reason Naruto had some otherworldly stamina, and it could be connected. After directing him to practice some hand seals, Iruka left to pay a visit to one of the most renowned ninjas in the village. Hokage Kakashi was in his usual spot, by a bridge in the northern part of the village, lounging in a tree and reading one of his adult-themed novels. Kakashi-sama, he began, stopped immediately by a raised hand that waved almost dismissively thereafter. Yo, Iruka-san, I've told you that there's no need to be so formal. He might be one of the most feared shinobi in the world, but he was also one of the most casual and least punctual. My apologies. I was taught to always respect my superiors, Iruka continued with a slight grin. It was hard to feel intimidated by Kakashi sometimes, although the questioning look from that one visible eye made him fidget a little. The mask over the Jonin's nose and mouth didn't help much either. I came to ask a favor, if you're not too busy today. I've been trying to work with Naruto on some chakra control, but he can't seem to mold chakra as easily as other kids his age. After 3 weeks of instruction there hasn't been even a puff of wind to indicate a simple bunshin. Don't get me wrong. I don't expect any kid his age to be able to perform the bunshin no jutsu successfully, but most can make some ambiguous figure. He took a deep breath, realizing that he was speaking quickly due to a touch of anxiety. Kakashi, however, looked as impassive as always. I think it's because Naruto has too much chakra, potentially many times the amount a 6-year-old should possess. I think it might have something to do with the Kyuubi. The last sentence was stated a bit more solemnly than the others, though his audience still failed to react. I was hoping that you might be able to demonstrate a clone technique that consumes a greater amount of chakra. If my theory is correct, this could help him a great deal. A very long moment passed, during which Iruka tried not to quail under Kakashi's flat gaze. Finally, a curt nod indicated his agreement, although it seemed reluctant. The only higher-level bunshin technique he could perform, without knowing his element, is the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. But as a B-rank jutsu, you should know that there's no way he'll be able to do it, Kakashi cautioned as they made their way back to where Naruto was practicing. It seemed that Iruka was taking this boy's development seriously, something the Jonin had little to say about. I know, but I can't perform the technique, and it's just a hunch. It was a lame response, but it was all he had. Iruka remained silent for the remainder of the short walk, arriving to see Naruto still screwing up his face in concentration and holding his hands in an imitation of the tiger seal. Naruto, this is Hokage Kakashi. He is a Jonin that's mastered over 1,000 jutsu. That was bound to get his attention and respect. As anticipated, the blonde's eyes turned into saucers as he bowed like Iruka had taught him. Now, Kakashi-sama is going to explain a different jutsu to you, alright? Please give him your full attention. Excited nodding ensued. Kakashi began, dropping unceremoniously to the ground into a cross-legged position. The boy was more respectful than he had expected, at least. Well, Naruto-kun, this is a more advanced clone technique called Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It takes a lot more chakra to use, and there's a different seal for it. As the legendary Jonin began explaining exactly how to perform the jutsu, Iruka gratefully noted that the man was treating Naruto like an adult, and more importantly like a real person. After Kakashi completed his explanation, following an energetic nod from the youngster, he agreed to demonstrate. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In the blink of an eye and a puff of white smoke, there was another Hokage Kakashi was sitting next to the original, indistinguishable. What surprised Naruto the most was that the Bunshin started talking to him, rather than the real Kakashi. Now, the neat thing about this ability is that when you make a copy of yourself, it retains a portion of your consciousness. Naruto blinked at him, confused. Kakashi blinked back, not used to explaining things to children his age. It has a mind of its own. An attentive and excited nod ensured his message had been understood this time. Additionally, the two main benefits of the Kage Bunshin is that it can mold chakra just like you, and when it's destroyed you gain the memories the clone experienced. Do you understand? A very slow nod accompanied a look that said, not really, but sort of. Just give it a try, Naruto, Iruka encouraged. Naruto dropped into a cross-legged position, perhaps assuming that it was necessary since Kakashi had done so, and concentrated. The silver-haired man had said to use a funny hand seal where he crossed his index and middle fingers instead of the tiger seal used for a normal bunshin. After a few minor corrections to his hand positioning, he tried molding the chakra like Kakashi had said to. About 10 seconds later, as Iruka was about to open his mouth and express his concern, Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. If Naruto had been a jonin performing the technique, it would have been fair to have a hearty laugh at the result. He was 6, however. Half of a square meter beside him had erupted in white smoke. Rather, it fizzled. A small and unrecognizable blob vaguely the color of his t-shirt and shorts had materialized, quivering for only a few seconds before going up in an alabaster mist. Naruto just sat staring at the spot, unable to fully process what had happened. Well, that was unexpected, Kakashi muttered, clearly surprised anything had happened at all. A glance up at Iruka showed a shocked but simultaneously satisfied expression. Naruto, that was great. Iruka's exuberance snapped Naruto from his momentary daze. But sensei, it didn't work, he responded, perplexed and disappointed. He had not been expecting much after his days of failure, but after seeing the plume of smoke his hopes had shot up. Oddly, it was Kakashi who responded first. Naruto, you need to understand that this is a pretty advanced jutsu. It's impressive that you managed to do anything with it at all. Iruka smiled appreciatively at his superior, knowing the effect that the other man's praise would have on a child that had only received it from one source prior. A broad, bashful grin spread across Naruto's face as he acknowledged the compliment with a bow, scratching at the back of his neck embarrassedly. Iruka was beginning to wonder if the boy had picked up that quirk from him. ******. The rest of summer went by quickly. With chakra control worked out, in theory at least, the remainder was spent getting Naruto's basic taijutsu forms up to par and working with kunai and shuriken. It was incredible how eager he was to learn and train. On days Iruka was busy, Naruto would take it upon himself to practice, and often even on days his sensei was free he would begin and end far outside of the Chunin's availability. Before he knew it, Iruka was preparing for classes to begin in only a week's time. Naruto had finally removed his aviator goggles in favor of a simple indigo headband tied the style of a Hitai-8. His wardrobe had changed to consist primarily of gray t-shirts and beige cargo shorts that reached just past his knees. Iruka was sure his tastes would change as he grew older, but at least he had been able to pick his own clothes for once. Some encouragement had been offered to the shopkeepers, of course. The night before his first day of class, Naruto approached the man he had nearly called Dad a few times now. Iruka-sensei. I know you're going to be my instructor for classes, but I don't want any special treatment, okay? There was a defiant spark in his eyes that Iruka would not forget any time soon. It reminded him a bit of the rebellious Naruto of the past, but spoke more of the young man standing before him now. He wanted to be the best ninja he could be, using only his own strength and determination. I promise I won't, Naruto. I know you'll excel on your own power. Furrowed brows communicated that his words hadn't quite registered. With a fond ruffle of the boy's hair, Iruka pulled him into a hug, the first time he had done so since welcoming the blonde to his home. Naruto froze momentarily, causing Iruka to quickly relax his hold and back off, thinking a boundary may have been crossed. However, a tight grip pulled him back, a few errant sniffs tugging a soft smile to the shinobi's lips. Minato, Kushina, tomorrow your son begins his journey to follow in your great footsteps. Chapter 2. Rough start. The first 3 weeks at the academy went as Iruka expected, even if they were a little disappointing. He had gotten his hopes up that things might be close to normal for Naruto now that he was attending classes nearly every day of the week, but it was not to be. Despite the nearly 2 months of remedial training they had done, the child was still noticeably behind the majority of his peers, struggling most with his ninjutsu studies. In taijutsu he fared a bit better, if only because he would tire out his opponent and gain the upper hand over the long run. The unnatural endurance and never give up attitude that Naruto had adopted proved frustrating for some of the prospective genin to deal with sometimes, but that was the least of his worries. Iruka-sensei. None of my classmates want to talk to me, Naruto lamented one afternoon, kicking a stone along the road back to Iruka's home. The Chunin should have anticipated this, of course, but he had been so focused on making sure that the blonde had been ready for training that the social aspect had been largely overlooked. Of course Naruto would want to make friends, what 6-year-old did not? Only now did Iruka truly realize that the youth's ostracization had been passed on to his classmates by their parents. This would take some delicate explaining. That's not true. Iruka began lightly, ruffling Naruto's spiky blonde hair and eliciting an insincere scowl. I think the Hyuga girl would talk to you if you tried. It was difficult not to notice the way the insufferably shy brunette watched Naruto from her seat at the back of the class, a mix of genuine curiosity and infantile admiration evident in her opalescent, pupil-less eyes. Naruto had naturally taken to being overtly friendly and a bit loud in class, apparently destined to be the class clown in a way. Iruka could not really blame him, either. After years of simply being ignored and even openly despised, it was no wonder he began seeking attention in such ways. Who? He asked with a furrowed brow, trying to remember her from their class introductions. A minute or two of thinking brought him to the answer. Oh, Hinata-san. Isn't she the one with weird eyes and red face? Naruto. Iruka scolded, though the youth's observations were not entirely inaccurate. Hinata is a very nice girl, and her eyes are like that because of her family's bloodline ability. As he expected, Naruto's face appeared to be the epitome of confusion. Nobody had ever explained the concept to him before. Some people have what are called bloodline limits, he explained as they rounded a corner, adopting his lecturing tone. These are certain special abilities they inherit from their families that can't be learned by anybody else. Hinata possesses the Byakugan, which uses her eyes to quote. He hesitated in his explanation, considering phrasing that the child would understand. It lets her see through things and at a much further distance than normal. She can also see the chakra inside of people. Saucer-like eyes stared up at him in rapt attention, fascinated by the concept. Uchiha Sasuke, another of your classmates, also comes from a family with a bloodline ability. The Sharingan is another one that uses your eyes, but it lets him copy a lot of jutsus just by seeing them, and can make him move faster. It was not a precise explanation, but one that would make sense. Sensei, that's not fair. Naruto had stopped and was looking up at him with a mix of chagrin and indignation. Why do they get special stuff like that? Iruka could see where the boy was coming from, so he was careful with a response. The last thing he wanted was Naruto holding a grudge or becoming upset with his classmates for something that they had no control over. The irony of such a situation would be tragic. They were just born into their families, Naruto. You can't be mad at them because of something outside of their own control. And just because they have those techniques doesn't mean they are automatically stronger. It takes more than just special skills to become a great ninja. Naruto looked a bit dubious but nodded. Iruka could see the gears turning, trying to decide what to do with the new information. I guess. Hey, do you think I should try to be their friends? He asked hopefully, the doubt already apparent in his voice. While the Hyuga girl seemed to hold no ill will towards Naruto, the Uchiha boy looked at him with at least a moderate amount of distaste. Leave it to the Uchihas to indoctrinate their young with their own ignorance. I think that sounds great. And remember what I told you. It's up to you to make a good impression. Even if you think somebody doesn't like you, just show them how nice and hardworking you can be. I bet they'll come around. The jubilant smile and nod was priceless. As they walked the remaining distance back to his apartment, Iruka wondered if it was wrong to get Naruto's hopes up. Well, if he really wants to become Hokage one day, he needs to start changing minds. What better minds to change than those of his peers? Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Unfortunately, Altering predispositions proved more difficult than Iruka had anticipated. Naruto did not give up on his in your face, nigh constant exuberance, something that made some edge away from him. However, as Iruka observed the behavior of his student, it became increasingly apparent that the attitude was merely a front. Naruto was nervous around his peers, and rather than act aloof and reserved like some of his classmates, Aburame Shino, for example, he became extremely extroverted. In reality, the boy just did not know how to engage others in casual conversation, a skill that most youths his age unabashedly possessed and acted on. Months passed with little to show in terms of improvements, at least in the social realm. Naruto possessed a surprising amount of motivation despite his situation, something Iruka supposed he would have needed to have in order to survive that long in the village. Unable to form connections with his classmates, the blonde took his unspoken frustration out on training. Logically considered, social skills were entirely foreign and a pain to learn for a youth that had basically raised himself. Exercise and self-instruction were an escape of sorts, leading to spending many extra hours honing his skills, gradually closing the gap that still existed between his fellow students. Up early again, I see, Iruka observed with a yawn one morning in early December. Recently Naruto had been getting up even earlier than his teacher to do some light physical exercise. This was the third time in a week Iruka had woken up to find his student doing push-ups on the living room floor. It was impossible to argue that training so much was not admirable, but it was not the discipline that worried him. The longer he failed to form friendships with his classmates, the more at risk he was of becoming isolated, eventually sinking into himself entirely. Many of the children in Naruto's class had already formed cliques, something unavoidable for youths, and the longer this persisted the harder it would get. An abuse of power was in order. All right students, quiet down please, Iruka chided over the dull roar. It was the last day of classes before the brief winter break, and the last few minutes of class at that. Nearly everyone was buzzing with excitement. Now I still expect you all to train during your breaks. A familiar chorus of grumbles greeted his announcement, and he could not help but grin slightly. Come on now. You can't expect to graduate and become great ninja if you don't practice a lot. That aside, I want you all to be aware that you will have new seating assignments when we resume classes next month. The complaining began almost immediately, but he merely held up a hand for silence and continued. Quiet down. Quiet down. If you want to sit next to somebody in particular, write down your requests on a piece of paper and hand it to me as you leave. I won't make any promises, but I will do my best to respect your wishes. Remember, only 3 people can sit together in a row, and this is a full class of 27 students. You have to sit somewhere next to 1 or 2 of your classmates. With that, he waited as most of the children hurriedly scribbled a name or 2 on a scrap of paper before being dismissed. As expected, Naruto shrugged and walked out first without placing a request. Both the Haruno girl, Sakura, and Inoichi's daughter Ino put in bids for Sasuke, who had managed to gain popularity on his looks and exceptional skills alone. To be fair, the child did seem to work hard to be like his brother Itachi. However, Sasuke seemed not to mind who he was put with and left in the same manner Naruto had. The very last person to leave was Hinata, the diminutive heiress to the Hyuga family, approaching bashfully with a tiny scrap of paper clutched to her chest. Iruka smiled encouragingly, which only proved to deepen the blush spreading across the girl's cheeks. In a rush she bowed and thrust the scrap atop the pile, almost running out of the room immediately thereafter. Iruka shook his head with a knowing smile, shuffling the papers together before picking the top one off to read the small, eloquent, and incredibly formal script. Hyuga Hinata requests to be seated next to Uzumaki Naruto. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It would not be until some time later that Iruka realized the incredible courage it had taken the young Hyuga to have even put forth her request, but he gladly abided by it. He felt a pang of guilt at manipulating the classroom environment in Naruto's favor, but quickly quashed the feeling after considering the advantages the rest of his students had obtained through a normal upbringing. A promise had been made not to give Naruto any special treatment, but he had taken that in terms of academic assistance and probably not embarrassing the boy. Iruka was doing what any parent might do for their child. He cared about Naruto's development, and knew that having even one or two friends would help tremendously. He only hoped he had chosen the right ones to bet on. As the class filed into the room on their first day of the spring semester, they automatically moved to their old seats, either in hopes that their teacher had forgotten to assign them or in genuine forgetfulness. "Everybody to the front of the class, please," he interrupted as the last student filed in. "Well, last two if you count the small white dog perched on his head." Kiba appeared to have inherited the Inuzuka clan's traits. "It's time to get your new seats for this semester." The expected groans came and went as the students moved sullenly to the front of the class. The assignments appeared to largely follow the groups everybody had been sitting in originally, with some changes here or there. Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino were all put at a table together as per their parents' request. They got along pretty well anyway, despite Ino's dismay at not being placed next to Sasuke. Shino, Kiba, and Sakura were placed in a row, the familiar whine from the pink-haired girl echoing her blonde friend. Over half of the class had been placed before. Without missing a beat, Iruka announced it. Moving on to the last set of seats near the window, starting in the back row, Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Hinata, and Uzumaki Naruto. Please take your seats. Next row. As Iruka continued, the three blinking children failed to move for a moment, glancing at one another before the boy with ebony tresses shrugged and sauntered up to take the window seat. Naruto watched after him for only a moment before smiling a little nervously at Hinata, who looked down quickly, face flushed and index fingers pushing together so hard the ends turned white. Not wanting to hold up the rest of the students looking to get to their seats, he trotted quickly up to take a seat next to Sasuke, the last of the trio taking her seat quietly after the blonde. The rest of the seating finished without a hitch, although the slightest of frowns twitched at Iruka's lips as he noted the state of that certain back row. The Uchiha boy sat staring out the window, not really trying to be rude but just more interested in whatever the outside world had to offer at the moment. Naruto was uncharacteristically quiet, hands in his lap and just looking around the room anxiously. Hinata did what Hinata usually did, although with a lot more color in her face than normal. She sat there, fidgeting ever so slightly, trying to appear as small as possible as if her presence might cause some huge inconvenience. "Well, I didn't expect them to hit it off immediately. I just hope I did the right thing." About a week later the first spark appeared. Up until that point the three had not spoken much beyond necessary collaborative classwork. Today was a team sparring match, where the class would split into groups of three and have multiple tag team matches against the rest of their peers. The rules were simple. Your group would choose a first opponent who would fight until knocked down, or until 3 points were scored against them, and then the next person would take their place and continue. Matches would occur one at a time in a round-robin style. The last team standing won, bragging rights until the next tournament. To Iruka's relief, Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke gravitated together almost immediately. It was to be expected. The entire class, as a matter of fact, simply did the comfortable thing and formed groups according to their assigned rows. After a moment of each of them looking at one another several times, Hinata more at the ground than any one of them, Naruto finally spoke up. "Well, who wants to go first? It should be somebody who can last longest, I think," Sasuke offered thoughtfully, explaining the reasoning he had come up with. "If one person can get through a lot of the teams by themselves, the other two will have a better chance with fewer people to fight right." The Hyuga girl nodded in agreement before looking back down to the ground, tinges of pink visible already. Naruto considered the proposal and shrugged. "Well, Iruka-sensei always says I have a lot of stamina or endurance or something. I can go first." The blonde had placed both hands behind his head, looking a bit embarrassed at the admission. Sasuke only nodded, Hinata mimicking his action and looking like she wanted to say something, but the words failed to escape. "All right," Naruto exclaimed boisterously, feigned confidence returning as their teacher set up the first matches. Iruka was surprised at his students' abilities, to say the least. It seemed some had taken his request seriously and worked on their taijutsu over the break, showing marked improvement from their last group sparring sessions. A streak of pride shone through at Naruto's performance, the dedication the boy had shown proven as he went through his first matches. Before long it was clear which three teams would prevail. Aside from Naruto's team, the team consisting of Shino, Kiba, and Sakura was still standing with only Shino having been beaten. Additionally Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji still stood in the ranks, the Nara boy currently fighting for his team with Choji in the last slot. Naruto seemed to be breathing a bit heavily for once, which was not too surprising as he had persevered through a slew of opponents with several close calls. At one point he had been down 2-0 against Shino, but held him off long enough to land a well-timed kick that took the bug user off of his feet. Close 1. Sasuke had murmured, though seemed to have a growing respect for his comrade's abilities. Finally, it was Naruto's turn again, this time against Kiba. The Inuzuka boy had proven to be well adept at hand-to-hand combat, and it was almost immediately apparent who had the upper hand in their bout. Faster than he would have liked, Naruto was against the ropes, forced to spend most of his efforts defending and hardly getting the chance to go on the offensive. Had he been less exhausted, the encounter might have been more even. However, the score was 2-1 in Kiba's favor, and things did not look good for him. Naruto-kun, a timid voice began, almost causing him to miss a block. Hinata almost never spoke unless spoken to, and even then usually a nod or quick shake of the head communicated what she needed to. Not to mention, the honorific being so personal threw him off a little. Remember, we're here too. She trailed off, no doubt hoping her encouragement had not come off negatively. Sasuke, however, nodded and voiced his agreement. Naruto smirked. He knew that, of course, but he was not about to give up on his team. The more he could get out, the better chance they had to win. I know, he grunted through an outside block, quickly pivoting to avoid a round kick aimed at his side. But we're gonna win. The opportunity came unexpectedly as Kiba lunged for a hook, letting his guard down on the opposite side. Naruto took the gamble, moving directly in the path of the blow and launching his own uppercut in response. The effect was almost as desired. With a simultaneous oomph, both boys were knocked off of their feet, Kiba landing on his rear end while Naruto ended up flat on his back with a throbbing eye. Despite the injury, he had the broadest grin on his face following a bark of laughter that could have made Akamaru, Kiba's dog, jealous. Hey, oops, guess it's up to you guys now. Iruka smiled, watching as his charge was helped to his feet by a concerned, flushed Hinata and a fairly impressed Sasuke. So it begins. Sasuke opted to fight next, apologizing to Hinata a bit cockily. Sorry you didn't get to fight today, Hinata-san, he said emphatically, stepping up to the sparring circle. The implication was not lost on the remaining students, instantly riled up by the brazen Uchiha. Despite the confidence, even Sasuke would later admit, begrudgingly, that he had underestimated his opponents, namely Shikamaru. As his first opponent, the Uchiha quickly learned the lesson that appearances were deceiving. Shikamaru slept a lot, even in class, and expressed how everything seemed to be troublesome. However, his taijutsu was nothing to scoff at, and before long the score was tied at 2. Both youths had been moving in a veritable frenzy, at least for their ages. Shikamaru was noticeably more exhausted than his adversary, and just before they re-engaged for what could have been the final time, he straightened and held up a hand. This is too troublesome. You win. Without a further explanation, he shoved his hands in his pockets and trudged back to his team. Sasuke blinked once or twice, but nodded and readied himself. Sakura's performance was dismal, to put it lightly. It was apparent that the girl had put little effort in her physical training, or at least not at all in her forms. She also seemed unable to concentrate against the boy that she always fawned over. In less than 30 seconds Sasuke had handily scored his 3 points without having been touched, and it seemed he had used the match as a breather from the last one. Iruka noted that he had taken it easy, preferring to score easy points on her shoulders and sighed when he could easily have taken a rougher route. Nicer than I expected from an Uchiha. Alright Tubby, he sighed, motioning for Choji to come forward to be his last encounter. Let's get this over with. Shikamaru winced as Choji's eyes narrowed to slits. Hinata gulped as the air around them seemed to grow heavier. She muttered something incoherent about things that are not nice, eyes on the ground and fingers pressed together in worry. The rotund boy stepped forward, shoving his chips in Shikamaru's hand. You'll regret that. Choji, who was normally unreadable and somewhat timid, seemed deathly serious after the insult. Shikamaru quietly mentioned something about a taboo to Ino. Almost as soon as Iruka had signaled the match to start, several shocked gasps escaped the crowd. One moment Sasuke was facing Choji, and the next he was sprawled on the ground with the wind knocked out of him, and angry Akamichi glaring down at him. I'm not fat, you jerk. I'm just big boned. Ino giggled and cheered for the unexpected victory, though she was fuming immediately after at her teammate for being so harsh with Sasuke. Sasuke returned to his group, shaking his head and looking depressed. Sorry. I guess I wasn't ready for that. He made a mental note to never call Choji fat again. Iruka almost let a grin slip. It was good to see the proud boy humbled a bit. That's all right, Sasuke-san. You did great. Ready to clean up, Hinata-san. The Hyuga looked mortified, shaking her head and backing up, which only caused Naruto to cock his head to the side and give her a quizzical look. Come on. I know you'll do great. Just give it your best shot. A squeak escaped her mouth and she jumped in response to Naruto grabbing her hand and pulling her back towards the circle. His big, encouraging smile gave her confidence, something that was entirely foreign to the heiress. She nodded slowly and took a few tentative steps to stand in front of Choji, who still looked more than mildly annoyed at the earlier quip from Sasuke. Begin. At Iruka's call, Choji moved into a basic taijutsu fighting stance before blinking at Hinata. It was well known that the Hyuga fought differently than most ninja, using the Juken style that was developed for their bloodline ability. Even with that knowledge, without having seen it before, her stance looked weird. As soon as the girl had lowered into her stance, the timidity washed away to reveal a focused youth, no doubt years into her special taijutsu training already. The light flush remained, but Hinata was all business, determined not to let her team down. The sight of his quiet classmate suddenly looking fierce took the anger out of Choji. He gulped, not sure what to think. His time for thinking was quickly over when a barrage of palm strikes from the diminutive Hinata rattled his guard, from the very beginning just struggling to keep up with her pace. Naruto and Sasuke sat gawking a few meters back, wondering why they had only seen basic taijutsu from their classmate up until that point. The match was decided faster than Sasuke's bout with Sakura, concluding with a tumult of applause and excited shouts from the rest of the students. Choji bowed and shuffled back to his team, apologizing several times to them and looking crestfallen. Hinata immediately bowed and scurried back into the crowd to rejoin her team. Her face was burning with the praise coming from every direction. No amount of stuttering insistence that she did not deserve it helped until Iruka came to her rescue. All right everyone, good work today. We had this exercise so that you all could find some of your own strengths and weaknesses, and maybe learn a little teamwork along the way. I want you all to work hard on your taijutsu. I'll be disappointed if we don't have a different winning team every week. With a chorus of, yes sensei. They all made their way back to the classroom, everyone chirping about the winning team and how cool it was to watch the last few fights. Way to go you guys. Naruto beamed as they got back to their seats, excitement nearly bubbling over. His teammates were not the only ones that noticed that he was no longer breathing hard. Sasuke, you kicked Shikamaru's ass. But I mean, he corrected at Hinata's wide eyes. He offered a bashful laugh before continuing. And Hinata, your taijutsu was so cool. Is that your family's fighting style? A subdued nod preceded a quiet statement, accompanied by the seemingly ever-present index fingers. Anyo. I only had one match, Naruto-kun. You and Sasuke-san did all the work. I barely did anything, Sasuke admitted begrudgingly, smirking at Naruto. You're the one who fought the rest of the class. How many matches was it? 8. 10. Iruka-sensei was right. You don't ever get tired, do you? Hinata nodded vigorously. It wasn't that bad, he said proudly, catching Iruka's stern look before making a face and lowering his voice. I mean, I got to go against all of the ones who didn't do their winter homework, I'm sure. I bet if I'd fought Kiba, Shikamaru, or Choji early on, you guys would have done a lot more matches. Sasuke shrugged, and Hinata looked inexplicably worried. It was true, to a degree. Alright, that's it for today. Be sure to start practicing your transformation jutsu at home. It's one of the 3 important jutsus you need to know before you can graduate. Naruto made a face. He never had much luck with jutsus, and had made little to no progress on the Kage Bunshin technique despite almost daily practice. Hinata-san, do you want to train a little after class? I want to spar a bit more since we didn't get much chance with today's competition. Sasuke had turned to Hinata to pose the question as the class began to leave, leaving a blinking Naruto between them. The received response was an odd, wide-eyed wonder from the Hyuga, though a quick nod afforded her confirmation. Naruto smiled and waved to the 2 of them, moving along before a hesitant voice stopped him. Naruto-kun, do you want to come with us? Hinata asked nervously, eyes cast anywhere but at him. If you're too tired it's okay. She turned scarlet as she finally caught sight of the blonde, who was grinning from ear to ear. Yeah, I just need to tell Iruka-sensei. I'll meet you guys in the yard in 5 minutes. He could barely contain himself as he bounded down the stairs between desks, all but exclaiming to their teacher his plans for the afternoon. Of course, the Chunin had no qualms, so long as he was back for their evening meal. Moments later Naruto sped out the door, slowing to a casual walk with a bit too much bounce in his step upon leaving the building. Iruka leaned against his desk at the front of the class, head shaking and smiling sadly. A lot had happened in one day, it seemed, and not all of it good even if the children all seemed happy. The intended 3 had indeed formed the beginnings of a friendship, he felt, and Naruto could not have been happier. Sasuke seemed to have reevaluated the boy too, and also learned a valuable lesson on humility. Hinata, though, despite her team's confidence and insistence that she fought well, seemed as down on herself as always, as if nothing she did was good enough. For whom it was inadequate was a mystery, though Iruka had a few guesses. It was no secret that her father Hiashi was an icy, intimidating, perfectionist of a man, and her mother had died years prior. The girl was riddled with the signs of anxiety, lack of confidence, and self-deprecation. Well, I can hope her new friends will help in ways I can't. I'll have to wait and see. When Naruto returned that evening for dinner he was bubbling over, talking almost non-stop about how the extracurricular sparring had gone. By his account Sasuke was better than he was in all categories, and Hinata was a lot faster at least, but rather than becoming disheartened these facts seemed to encourage him to train even harder. His incredible stamina did not even seem to come to mind as a great advantage he had over the other 2. Somewhere in the last 7 months Naruto had learned the all-important ability to be humble. Iruka wondered wryly where he could have gotten that from, stopping himself from seething about the boy's lack of proper upbringing. All it took was something small, and he's come so far in such a short time. We're gonna train every day after classes, and even on off days. Naruto exclaimed, flushing slightly at Iruka's chiding for being too loud indoors before continuing. Sorry sensei. But Sasuke showed me this cool fire jutsu, and Hinata can already do a perfect transformation. Can we work more on my chakra stuff and ninjutsu? Iruka blinked, but grinned. It seemed they were already inspiring one another. Of course we can, Naruto. You want to set a goal for yourself. His student stopped mid-bite and furrowed his brows in the usual manner, denoting he did not quite understand. Naruto, your biggest goal is to be Hokage one day, right? He waited for a nod before continuing. Well, it's important to set little goals along the way that will help you get there. For example, you have to be a genin to be Hokage, but before that you have to be a chunin, my rank, and even before that you have to make genin. So your first smaller goal should be to be a genin, right? Naruto nodded slowly this time, connecting the dots in his head. In order to become a genin, you have to master a few simple ninjutsus, have adequate ability with taijutsu, and be able to handle your ninja tools well. So when I asked if you wanted to set a goal, I mean a goal that will help you towards one of those smaller things, because eventually your goals will build up until you reach your big goal. With all the pieces put in place, a final excited nod indicated that he had understood everything up to that point. So I think we should work really hard and see if you can get your Kage Bunshin technique by the end of the year. How does that sound? A whole year. Iruka-sensei, do you really think it will take that long? Relatively speaking, A year of Naruto's life was a significantly larger portion of his entire existence than it was for Iruka, so the skepticism was understood. The youth likely neglected to consider how difficult the jutsu actually was to master. Yes, a whole year. Remember when I told you that you have a lot more chakra than most people? Naruto nodded, recalling also that Iruka had said not to mention it to anybody. Well, it's making it harder for you to focus on your ninjutsu because there's so much. So it might take longer for you to get used to some things. Does that make sense? The blonde sure liked nodding. Great, so let's aim for December, alright. See if you can learn it before Hinata-chan's birthday. Naruto made a face and asked a question about why exactly Iruka had added the suffix chan to his classmate's name. The older male was reminded daily how, while Naruto had picked up most of his language habits and meanings from the orphanage, some things had gone uncovered. The remainder of the meal was encompassed by a pseudo-lecture about honorifics, when to use them, and how to use them. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. A month had passed since that day, and sure enough the trio trained almost daily, further honing their taijutsu skills and occasionally finding time for chakra exercises. Naruto had advanced alarmingly fast in his taijutsu, to the point that Sasuke was now struggling to keep up and he was helping his friends with their footwork and technique. Of course, even just sparring with Naruto over an extended period of time increased their endurance as well. Hinata helped both of them with their chakra control and its practical applications, to the best of her abilities, while Sasuke tried to impart some knowledge of the jutsus his brother had taught him. All in all, the experience helped all of them improve noticeably. Trouble came, however, as trouble always tends to. 2 months before the end of the spring semester, Hinata arrived home after a productive day at the academy. The Hyuga estate was vast and lavish, as the family was one of the wealthiest in the village, but the gardens could not hold the girl's attention for the time being. Her father had sent for her. The only thing going through her mind right then was a mental checklist, making sure she was presentable and had a stutter-free explanation of the day's events ready in case he asked. Not because he cared if she enjoyed it or not. Such things were unimportant, after all, but to ensure that her instruction was going well. Hinata had been a disappointment to her father, a fact that she was reminded of almost daily at her home. If not by her father, then by her elder cousin Neji, or even her younger sister Hanabi, who showed much more promise. The elder daughter of Hiashi was on the verge of being disowned, or perhaps she had already been proverbially cast out. It was hard to tell some days. All Hinata knew was that she needed to work harder and earn her father's praise. It was her fault for being a failure, so she had to take responsibility and fix it. The audience chamber was dimly lit and quiet. Too quiet, as usual. Hyuga Hiashi sat on a slightly raised dais, considering his eldest offspring coldly. No hint of paternal warmth emanated from the leader of the clan. I understand that you are engaging in extra training after hours at the academy, he stated rhetorically, watching his daughter for any hint of a reaction. Nothing yet. I have been told you are training with an Uchiha. I approve of this choice and recommend you continue. Their clan is strong, and with his help you may yet salvage your worth. A pitiful, hopeful expression appeared on Hinata's face before it was erased by a hard look. However, I also understand that the Uzumaki child is also taking part in this training. I thought I had cautioned you about him. He is dangerous filth, and I have told you more than once to maintain distance from him. But you have gone against my wishes and now willingly consort with him. Hinata's mouth opened and closed once, causing Hiashi to raise an inquisitive eyebrow. Had she actually been about to defend her actions? You are not to spend any more time with Uzumaki Naruto. Do you understand? A long moment passed with a barely noticeable shimmering of the girl's eyes, the only animation to an otherwise stoic face. I will ask only once more, Hinata. Do you understand? His words cut like no blade could, finally eliciting a tight nod from her before she was dismissed unceremoniously. Hinata was used to tears. Many evenings had been spent curled up in her room, crying for reasons beyond her own understanding. But she knew why this time. She knew that her father had demanded she give up one of the only friends she had ever made, a boy that inspired her and whom she could gain confidence from, even if only once in a while. But why? Why did the adults hate Naruto so much? Why did even her peers whisper things about him like the older villagers? She had asked only two people in her life. One was her father, who had merely berated her for asking such a foolish question. The other was one of her retainers, who kindly suggested that he was not allowed to tell. That was what bothered the young Hyuga more than anything else. They were not allowed to, but that meant it must be a secret. What kind of secret could it be that was worth trying to put down such a courageous boy? Silent sobs carried her to sleep as the puzzle refused to solve itself in her mind. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Naruto, why hasn't Hinata been training with you and Sasuke? Iruka asked on night when Naruto came home and began explaining what he and Sasuke had been working on. All I've heard mention of this last month was training with Sasuke, and every time I ask about Hinata you just say she's busy. What happened, Naruto? I don't know, sensei. He answered honestly with a shrug, though his expression denoted he was bothered by it. She doesn't talk much in class anymore either, not that she used to much. Or that we talk in class. But one day she just said her dad wants her to train with him after school instead. I mean, that seems pretty neat. Her Juken is really cool. The mixed emotion in his statements was more than obvious. On one hand he wanted his friend back, but on the other he could not be mad that she was spending time with her dad training. You said she isn't talking as much in class. Iruka had put his chopsticks down, hands folding beneath his chin. Naruto nodded guiltily, thinking he was mad about them carrying on conversations in class. I see. Well, I'm sure she'll be back with you and Sasuke soon. Naruto looked curious but nodded, unconvinced. The next day, after class, Iruka called Sasuke and Hinata to his desk before they were able to leave the classroom. Can you wait in the courtyard, Naruto? See if you can do 200 push-ups before Sasuke gets there. The challenge was taken to with gusto, the blonde racing from the room to begin immediately. A fond smile lingered on Iruka's lips for a moment before he turned to the pair in front of him, one looking curious while the other fidgeted nervously, staring at the floor. What have your parents told you about Uzumaki, Naruto? Hinata's face shot up in alarm, all but confirming the Chunin's suspicions, though it was Sasuke who offered an explanation first. My dad said to avoid him, he answered with an uncomfortable shrug. He won't say why, but he said that Naruto is dangerous. Itachi said not to worry about it though, so I didn't listen. I haven't seen anything wrong with Naruto, and he's fun to train with. Iruka's nod, more appreciative than the child knew, brought about another shrug from Sasuke. My father has not said anything about Naruto-kun, Iruka-sensei, she mumbled at the ground, fingers grasping the hem of her shirt tight enough to make her fingers white. Hinata was exceptional at telling white lies with a straight face in most situations, but when caught in the open like this it was impossible to keep the emotion out. Thank you, Sasuke. You can go meet up with Naruto now. With a nod and glance to his friend, the Uchiha boy left silently. Iruka considered Hinata for a few long seconds, carefully choosing his phrasing. Hinata, you don't have to tell me, but I think it's safe to assume that your father has told you something similar. Her grip tightened. There's not much I can do for you. I know, like Sasuke, you don't want to have to be separated from your friends. The slightest of nods told him that she acknowledged that much. I also don't know what it's like for you at home, and unfortunately it's not my place to ask. However, he paused, finally seeing her slightly teary eyes raised to his. I can assure you that Naruto is not dangerous. He is a kind, determined boy that doesn't deserve what Konoha has forced on him. Understand? Hinata nodded with more fierceness than he knew she possessed. All right, he said quietly, smiling sadly at her, I'll see you tomorrow then. She bowed and left in a hurry. Only after a full minute of watching the empty doorway did Iruka notice the tiny drops of blood dripping from his fingers. He had apparently been holding his wrist very firmly behind his back. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. What is it you wanted to speak about, Yumino Iruka? Hiyashi seated himself across from the instructor, not bothering to keep the distaste out of his voice. My daughter's performance has been above average, I assume. Yes, Hiyashi-sama, Iruka began carefully, trying to put the powerful man at ease. Hinata's grades are the best of her class, as one should expect of a member of the Hyuga family. This earned him a hard look from Hiashi, followed closely by a curt nod. However, her grades are not why I asked you here. I have noticed that she has become more withdrawn in the last month or so, more so than usual. Early this semester she seemed to get along well with Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, but lately seems to have abandoned their friendship, so to speak. As expected, Hiashi showed little reaction beyond a twitch of his eyebrow at the mention of the village pariah. I told my daughter to stay away from the boy. The Uchiha clan does not remember what happened nearly 8 years ago, it seems. A pity. I encouraged Hinata to train with Sasuke, but his association with the demon has prevented that. It took all of Iruka's self-control to maintain a straight face and not grind his teeth. I see. Well, Hiashi-sama, I think that is regrettable. Naruto was helping your daughter with her stamina and chakra capacity, in addition to simply serving as a sparring partner for her to practice Juken. And, I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that Naruto is a demon. He finished the last portion in a rush, doing his best to keep every shred of anger from his tone. Iruka-sensei, Hiashi began frostily, blank eyes seeming to stare into the instructor's soul. Have you also forgotten the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the incarnation of evil itself that ravaged this village? Have you forgotten the thousands that died at its claws, including your own parents? Iruka was proud of himself for not even flinching at the topic he had seen coming. Uzumaki Naruto possesses that very demon and should have been killed the same night it was sealed inside of him. No, Iruka began, unable to keep a semblance of fury from his voice. No, Hiashi-sama, Naruto is not the Kyuubi. The Yondaime sacrificed his life to seal that damned fox inside of him. Naruto never once had a choice in the matter. Even so, he does not possess the demon as you imply. He keeps it imprisoned, and as far as I am concerned he will until the day he dies. The Kyuubi does not define who the boy is, he does, through his words and actions. And I can tell you from experience that Uzumaki Naruto is one of the kindest, most selfless children I know, and despite dealing with the whole village's spite his entire life he is still determined to protect them. Does that sound like a monster to you, Hiashi-sama? Silence. Iruka was unsure whether Hiashi was in shock at being rebuked, or if he was merely considering the words of the considerably younger Chunin. Likely the prior. It was a sobering thought, considering that the Hyuga clan head had significant sway over the village, to the point he could probably get Iruka removed from his post. An eternity seemed to pass before Hiashi stood without saying a word, approaching the door to the small office. He turned at the threshold, looking back towards what he considered to be an impudent teacher. Let us hope you are right, for all our sakes. With that he was gone, and Iruka was left to sag heavily in his seat. Hiashi's killer intent had been more than palpable, it had radiated violently throughout the room and likely several meters past. It had left the Chunin drained and shaking slightly, but he had gotten his point across. He could hope, at least. The next day at Academy, Iruka was struck speechless, stiffening as Hinata entered the room. He hoped against hope that nobody could sense the unbridled fury building up inside, although it seemed a few nearby students sensed the unbelievably rare pressure of his killer intent. A slew of unreasonable, borderline insane thoughts rushed through his mind. I will kill Hyuga Hiashi. When the Hokage hears about this he'll. Hinata was slouched, which in and of itself was unsettling considering her normal poise. Although her face was downcast as per usual, Iruka had made out bruises along her neck and cheeks. From the way she was moving it could be assumed the injuries were more extensive than that. Hinata, he stated tightly, though quietly. The girl winced and turned to him wearily. Come with me please. She looked apprehensive, but far too sullen to put up any fight. It was an exercise in temperance to say nothing of her condition. He had seen her come in with bruises before and even asked about them once. He had been assured that they were the result of rigorous training with her father. I'm sure they were. I'm damn sure. A trip to the resident nurse did not take long. Although they covered most of her small body, the bruises and sores were minor enough to be treated with rudimentary healing techniques in short order. The very worst part was that neither Iruka nor the kindly woman treating Hinata could pry about the wounds. It was clan business, and as such was outside of even the Hokage's rule. It was physical abuse, plain and simple, disguised as training. The girl said nothing throughout the ordeal. When they returned to class, a few minutes past the scheduled start time, Hinata still looked tired, but at least stood straighter and was no longer in physical pain. The psychological pain. Iruka could only shake his head as he watched her walk up to her seat. That sort of pain doesn't heal the same. The Hyuga girl seemed a bit different that day. Despite the obvious mistreatment the night prior, she appeared to smile more, talk more with Naruto and Sasuke, and slowly seem like her old self. It was not until Naruto burst into the kitchen that evening, breathless, that Iruka discovered the reason. Hinata's back. You were right, sensei. It made sense in the most painful way. Hiyashi had likely gone home that night after speaking to Iruka and taken out his frustration on his daughter. But, at the same time, what the Chunin had said could not be refuted by a logical mind. Naruto had undoubtedly been helping his daughter in her training, and even he would have to concede that assuming the boy to be equivalent to his prisoner was absurd. Iruka ground his teeth again, tears springing to his eyes unbidden as he pulled Naruto into a spontaneous embrace. Good. Naruto? He asked breathily, trying not to sound as emotional as he felt. There was an indistinguishable sound that noted he was being listened to. Take care of your friends, especially Hinata. Good friends are hard to come by, and you should treasure them. I will, Iruka-sensei, Naruto responded, sounding confused but sincere. Naruto understood a lot about pain and loneliness, Iruka knew. In the future, when he better understood his friend's situation, he would need that experience to be there for her. Damn it, somebody needs to be. Chapter 3. Tragedy Strikes. Iruka stretched and leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded as he watched his three students spar in the summer heat. It had been a month already since the end of the spring semester, but Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke still spent most days together. Most of the time they trained, but occasionally they simply played games or chatted on walks. Ever since Hinata had returned to the group, they seemed more determined than ever to improve, as if her presence had revitalized their efforts. Despite the heat, they showed little to no lack of focus. Naruto and Hinata were sparring at the moment, allowing Sasuke a breather on a nearby bench. Both boys had long since removed their shirts, an action met with furious blushing by their female companion, and were covered in sweat. Her clothes clung to her as well, and she lost her focus to a giggle thinking about what it would be like to be a boy. Iruka, unseen by the group, raised an eyebrow. Hinata had laughed. Naruto took the opening presented and scored a point through her block, though his control had improved enough so that the blow was little more than a tap. Yeah. First point I've scored on you today, Naruto laughed as he settled back into his stance. Hinata's Juken had not only improved in the last few months, but she had also taken to modifying the style on her own. While the Hyuga Taijutsu largely focused on rapid palm strikes, Hinata had begun incorporating more kicks and advanced footwork into the style as a result of the boys' sparring. The result, for the time being, had proven her temporarily superior to her sparring partners until they were able to figure out effective counters. Hinata nodded excitedly, glad for her friend's progress. She was far too nice to ruin his accomplishment by admitting she had lost focus. About 10 minutes later found her sufficiently tired. Naruto had managed to score 2 more points since his first, though he had taken a significant amount more than she. Seeing Sasuke looking a bit down on energy still, Naruto straightened and stretched. You guys want to go to Ichiraku for lunch? Iruka-sensei took me there last week and their ramen is great. Sasuke and Hinata agreed readily, both tired and needing a lengthy break anyway. Naruto prattled on about the different types of ramen he was planning to get as they moved away, leaving a grinning Iruka watching after them. Naruto had taken his mentor's words seriously. Whenever his friends were tired, he would find an excuse to rest, whether it be for lunch or just lying in the grass for a while. Iruka was sure that Sasuke and Hinata knew he was just being nice. It was hard to miss how Naruto always seemed full of energy, or how his heart rate returned to normal after only a moment's rest. But the blonde boy just wanted to make sure his friends were alright, so he did not mind the necessary breaks. He did love ramen, after all. Unfortunately, he still had yet to make progress on his cage bunshin technique. No matter how much Hinata worked with him or how often he practiced, Naruto could only form that small discolored, unstable blob. It was getting to the point that he was even getting frustrated with himself. In all things, Naruto refused to give up, trying and trying until he got it. But now he had encountered an obstacle that seemed impassable. Or at least it seemed that way, until the day Iruka decided to come join them for some chakra control exercises. All three were sitting cross-legged side by side, hands held in the ram seal and focusing. Iruka strode across the field they had been training in, sitting across from them with a proud smile. None of them moved, not even to check who had approached. Iruka blinked. Their focus was impressive. Several minutes later, Naruto finally opened his eyes and sighed in exasperation, falling back into the grass. This prompted Hinata and Sasuke to blink their eyes open, though they appeared not to mind that they had been interrupted. "Don't worry, Naruto. You'll get it one of these days," Sasuke assured, leaning back on his hands. Hinata nodded encouragingly. It seemed that, in the same way that Naruto encouraged them in their sparring and took care to give them plenty of rest, the other two encouraged him in the areas he was less adept. It worked better than Iruka could have hoped. "Your friends are right, Naruto," Iruka confirmed, watching the three closely. "I think I may have thought of a way to help you a little." "Hinata, you are able to use your Byakugan, yes?" The girl blushed but nodded, eyes traveling to the ground as if it was something to be embarrassed about. "Excellent. Can you sit right across from Naruto, please?" Iruka had been working on a theory for the last month or so, but without a Sharingan or Byakugan he could not confirm it. Naruto sat up and looked at his teacher dubiously, but shrugged and took up his cross-legged position, Hinata bashfully taking up a position in front of him. "Hinata," he whispered as low as he could manage as Naruto began to focus, making sure only she was privy to his words. "When you look at Naruto with your Byakugan, you might." I know, sensei," she breathed, and to his relief she did not seem put off. "I looked a few times, to see if I could tell why." Iruka blinked, but nodded. "All right then," he said a little louder so that Naruto and Sasuke could hear as well. "I want you to use your Byakugan and watch Naruto as he tries to use his jutsu, all right?" The girl nodded and muttered, "Byakugan," to activate her bloodline. The veins surround both eyes bulged, her blank white, pupil-less eyes also acquiring minute black lines that outlined what might be considered a pupil. "Naruto, try the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." "Yes, sensei." He sighed, crossing his fingers and concentrating. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A puff of smoke appeared beside him, revealing again the unrecognizable mound that disappeared quickly thereafter. "Aj, sensei, I can't do it." Iruka put up his hand, turning to Hinata. "Hinata, what did you see?" "Not much, sensei," she admitted dismally, sound for all the world like she believed it was her fault. "He just has so much chakra I can hardly tell if any of it moves. The only thing I saw was a little bit of red chakra, I think." She silently berated herself for stuttering after making almost all the way through without. Iruka had been expecting the first answer, but was taken aback by the addition. "Red chakra. Are you sure?" Hinata nodded, looking frightened like she had gotten in trouble. Iruka shook his head. He would have to talk to the Sandaime about this. However, her insight had confirmed his suspicions. Now he just had to hope that he was correct. "All right, Naruto. I assume you're only trying to create one clone, right?" Naruto nodded. "Why would he try to create more?" "Try to create more than one. Let's say, try to make 3 and see what happens." His protege looked perplexed but complied nonetheless, closing his eyes and forming the seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It took a second longer than before, but sure enough 3 puffs of smoke appeared around the boy and. "Well, that's certainly an improvement. I think," Sasuke offered dubiously, looking at the 3 clones, and trying to figure out if his friend had succeeded or not. The Bunshin were recognizable now, but looked incredibly thin and pale, wilting to the ground quickly before vanishing in simultaneous puffs of smoke. "All right, Naruto. I think I know what you need to work on now," Iruka said happily, unable to keep the grin from his face. Meanwhile the blonde was rubbing the back of his head, a mixture of pride and embarrassment evident. I want you to spend more time working on chakra control, but more specifically molding the smallest amount of chakra you can, alright? But sensei, why would I want to use so little? Iruka hesitated, glancing at Hinata and Sasuke, who were both looking up at him. Well, they already know about his massive chakra. May as well act like it's not a secret. For some reason you have way too much chakra, Naruto. I'm sure Hinata has said something about your enlarged chakra coils. She and Naruto nodded, though it was apparent that the blonde had no idea what that meant. Basically it means you can hold more chakra than most people. But because you have so much, it's harder to pull out little bits to do normal jutsus. If you practice molding small amounts of chakra, it will help your control for all jutsus. Understand? Naruto nodded again in a way that said he understood most of it at least. Good. I have to go to a meeting now, so I'll leave you three to practice. With that Iruka waved and left, hoping his insight proved useful. As they got back to their exercises, Hinata was distracted. She had seen Naruto's vast chakra reserves before and at first it had been shocking, but soon it was something she just accepted as part of him. The red chakra, however, had never been apparent until that day. As a matter of fact, it seemed to spark even more when Naruto created the three Bunshin. The Hyuga had not used her eyes too much outside of her own compound, but never had she seen chakra that was not blue even in the strongest ninja like her father. Maybe it has something to do with the secret, she pondered before refocusing her attention on molding chakra. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. What can I do for you, Iruka? The Sandame sat back in his office chair, looking a bit older than usual. He smoked his favorite pipe steadily and wore a kindly expression. If Iruka had not known better and the Hokage had not been wearing the hat indicating his office, the old man might appear to be a simple grandfatherly figure. As everybody knew, this was not the case. Hokage-sama. Iruka began reverently with a bow, remaining standing as a sign of respect. I came to ask about a certain discovery concerning Uzumaki Naruto. He tensed for a moment, but relaxed again upon seeing the Sandame's smile. Ah, Naruto. I never got the chance to personally thank you for taking the boy in. I can see the difference it has made. The Yondaime would be overjoyed to know that the boy had been accepted, even if by one person. The old man's smile faltered at the final mention, continuing after a thoughtful pause. What is this discovery? Sir, Naruto has befriended Uchiha Sasuke and Hyuga Hinata. They've become training partners and are helping one another hone their skills. They get along really well and. He coughed and ducked his head, realizing he had gotten carried away. Hiruzen's smile indicated that he did not mind the information, although his expression darkened as Iruka continued. Hinata was using her Byakugan to monitor Naruto's chakra as he attempted the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A raised eyebrow prompted a brief explanation as to why the 7-year-old was attempting such an advanced technique before he was able to continue. She told me that there was red chakra present inside of Naruto, he finished in a breath, unable to keep the concern from edging into his tone. I was hoping that you might have some insight as to what it might be. I think you know as well as I what the likely cause is, Iruka, the Hokage sighed, massaging his temples and looking even older. Chakra in humans is blue. It is always blue, except in unnatural phenomena. As you are well aware, the Kyuubi no Kitsune is an unnatural phenomenon. They sat in silence for a moment. Iruka had expected but hoped against the coming postulation, but it came nonetheless. The fourth invented the seal on Naruto himself. The 8 trigram seal is made to weaken, or loosen, over time if you will to allow the Kyuubi's chakra to leak out. If it did not, it would eventually kill the boy. Noticing Iruka's mouth agape, the Sandame smiled sadly. Don't worry, Iruka. He is in no danger of causing himself or anybody else harm. The Kyuubi's chakra is volatile though, it will make it much harder for Naruto to perform most jutsus as he gets older. The fox's presence within Naruto had already increased his chakra levels to a high Chunin level, and with all of the additional training he has been doing I would wager it has reached Jonin level now. Hinata says his coils look like Kakashi's. This news caught the Hokage off guard and he caught himself staring. He had known the approximate effects of having the 9 tails sealed within the child, but he had not expected those results. I doubt he will be able to utilize such stores, Iruka continued, scratching and shaking his head in bewilderment. At least the Kyuubi's presence has helped in some areas. Naruto recovers from injuries incredibly fast and has incredible stamina. I've seen him spar for 2 hours straight, and by the end he had no bruises or scrapes, and he recovered in minutes. I've never seen anything like it. Another sad smile from the Sandame stopped him from going further. Let us hope the effects remain positive. I have faith in Naruto, and I know you do as well. Iruka turned a bit red but nodded. After an unrelated discussion concerning the academy, he was dismissed. For a time Hiruzen stared out the window of his office in the Hokage building, thin tendrils of smoke rising from his long pipe. Let us hope, and have faith. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Before they knew it, classes had begun again. A few months passed uneventfully, though Naruto's marks in all subjects had improved dramatically. Sasuke and Hinata still had the best scores in the class, but after a long summer of training Naruto was catching up quickly. All three were unmatched in their taijutsu, though there were a few students that showed great promise. Kiba appeared to have been training as well, and even Sakura seemed to have done more work than expected on her taijutsu. Shikamaru had developed what Iruka called a lazy style of sparring, but it was surprisingly effective and kept his opponents guessing. What Shino lacked in power he made up for in speed and reach. Choji continued to be a timid boy, though if anybody mentioned his taboo he might be considered an unstoppable force. Ino seemed entirely unconcerned with taijutsu, preferring fawning over Sasuke when she was not working on her chakra control and ninjutsu. Iruka could not complain about that too much. It was important to stick with your strengths, so long as you had the basics down in all areas. Rankings seemed to change every week among the three friends. More often than not Sasuke came out on top. He had no chance of outlasting Naruto in a long match, so he had to either knock his friend down or score his points fast. When he failed to do either, Naruto claimed the top spot in their sparring for the day. Hinata was not far behind either, and even managed to win once or twice a week. Instead of pride in that accomplishment, however, she chastised herself for not doing better while simultaneously silently cheering the two boys on. Iruka noted that she did seem marginally less shy, but the ground still occupied most of her attention and her nervous habits had not disappeared. Shortly after Naruto's 8th birthday, in mid-October, everything changed. The news came to Iruka in the middle of the night via an Anbu agent knocking on his door. Naruto lay asleep, tired from a long day. Meet at the academy, room 201A. Leave Naruto here. With that brief message he was gone, vanishing like a wraith in the night. Iruka squinted at the moon worriedly, wondering if the reddish tint was just his imagination. He glanced back into his apartment before closing the door and leaping off the balcony towards the academy. Room 201A was an auditorium usually used for presentations. Now was no exception, as most of the instructors and many Jonin and Anbu sat or stood around worriedly. Every one of them knew this was an emergency situation, but nobody yet knew why. Slowly, a shrouded figure made his way to the dimly lit podium, a trail of white smoke drifting behind him. The Hokage's voice was hard and racked with anguish, sadness, and rage all in one. His killer intent filled the room and sent shivers through even some of the Anbu. This was serious. Konohagakure Shinobi, he began formally, keeping the shaking from his voice. A few hours ago one of our Anbu agents entered the Uchiha compound to investigate a report of suspicious activity. Upon arrival, it was discovered that the entire Uchiha clan has been slaughtered. The collective gasps almost outnumbered the disbelieving stares. Nobody could have managed such a thing. The Uchiha were a strong clan, many of their members possessing the Sharingan. There was but one group that might have been able to manage it, and even then. The culprit, the Sandame continued, gripping the edge of the podium with such ferocity that the wood splintered around his fingers, is Uchiha Itachi. Iruka's mind had gone blank at the announcement. The tragedy was horrific in and of itself, but Sasuke, one of Naruto's close friends. When Itachi's name fell there were cries of outrage from the gathered audience, but Iruka could only stare, unable to come to terms with what he was hearing. This was not possible. It was not happening. It could not be. There was only one survivor, one we assumed was left out of pity or attachment. Uchiha Sasuke has been placed in protective custody with Ibiki and will be interviewed as soon as he is awake. Itachi is being placed in Konoha's bingo book as an S-rank missing nin as we speak. He is not to be trusted, and any and all information concerning him is to be surrendered to myself or Ibiki. That is all. The Hokage turned sharply to slowly retreat into the shadows, tailed by several Anbu and his advisors. This is a nightmare. It's not happening. I'm going to go to sleep, wake up, and everything will be as it was before. God damn it, it's going to be the same. It was not the same. Iruka had not slept, unable to sink into slumber and instead boring a hole in the ceiling with his eyes. Hours passed before he heard the telltale grunts from the living room indicating that Naruto was up and exercising already. Naruto. Iruka did not want to get up. He wanted to lay there forever and sink into the earth. But it was his duty as Naruto's guardian to tell him. He could only pray that the boy. What? That he won't take it poorly. That he won't die inside. Yeah, right. The Chunin steeled himself and got up, walking slowly to the living room and standing tiredly by his student. Good morning, Iruka-sensei, Naruto said amiably between sit-ups, grinning ridiculously until he saw the expression on his teacher's face. Iruka looked hollow, empty, as if his soul had taken a vacation and forgotten to tell him. He was pale with dark circles under his eyes, and the usual light behind his eyes was nowhere to be seen. Sensei. What's wrong? Sasuke. His voice was hoarse, and he had to cough before continuing quietly, not able to look the child in his eyes. Sasuke's clan was wiped out last night. He was the only one who survived. Silence. Naruto's face contorted, and for a moment Iruka was unsure whether the boy was bursting with righteous fury or unable to contain the overwhelming sadness. In the end it was both, as the blonde ended up with his arms wrapped about his legs with his head buried by his knees, doing his best not to cry but with silent sobs racking his small body. His nails, which seemed more jagged than normal, had dug into his legs and pierced the skin, spawning a few trickles of blood. Iruka fell to his knees and embraced the youth, only able to hold back his tears out of his duty as a comforter. Remember what I said about being there for your friends, Naruto? He asked softly. He felt the nod and heard a sharp sniff. Sasuke is going to be in pain for a long time. As his best friend, I trust you'll do everything you can to help him. Another nod was all Naruto could manage before he was crying outright. Iruka already knew that no amount of comfort or understanding could mend the Uchiha's wounds. No matter the pain that Naruto has suffered his whole life, having one's entire family taken from him in one night was a whole different brand of devastation. All around Konoha that night and morning, parents hugged their children a little tighter than normal. The situation was either explained delicately or overheard, and by the next morning the whole town knew of the scandal. The students filed into class silently, the weight of what had happened not lost on their young minds. As Naruto reached the top of the stairs leading to his row, Hinata all but sprinted into the room, bolting straight up the aisle and colliding with him hard. It took a moment for anybody surrounding to notice what had happened, but as soon as they had their eyes averted, trying their best to hold back tears of their own. Naruto had been knocked down with his back against the wall, Hinata's tiny arms wrapped around his waist, her face buried in his chest. Much later she might look back and feel ashamed for her actions, but not now. Naruto's face contorted again as he felt his friend's hot tears seeping through his shirt, but he willed himself not to cry. Instead he just leaned over the girl, putting one hand on her back and the other on her shoulder like he had seen some adults and older kids do to comfort people. Iruka had watched silently as the Hyuga girl had entered and shot to Naruto for comfort. His eyes averted as well. He knew it would be impossible to remain stoic if he watched. Hiashi had likely informed his family of the occurrence in the manner fitting of one so cold, emotionlessly, and offering no comfort to the daughter for whom the news impacted so much. Judging by the way Hinata had reacted, it was likely she had spent the early morning by herself. Class is cancelled today, Iruka said flatly, standing slowly and looking over his class. None of them looked like they would be able to focus on their studies today. Hell, he would not be able to. I'll see you all tomorrow. One by one they stood and exited the room silently, none of them wanting to be the first to mention why they were all upset. As the last student left the room, Shino, looking straight-faced as Iruka could tell behind his sunglasses and high collar, Iruka looked to the top row. Hinata was still quavering but seemed to have loosened her grip on Naruto. He was simply staring at his instructor with a pleading expression, eyes asking why such a thing had to happen. Let's go, Naruto. Hinata, I want you to come with us too. She did not move, and Naruto looked down with no small amount of concern, before glancing back up and mouthing the word, sleeping, with a questioning expression. Iruka could only assume Hiashi had woken his family in the middle of the night to inform them, and following that the young girl had tired herself out by crying for hours. Can you carry her, Naruto? He asked quietly. We're going to the park. A few minutes later found Iruka and Naruto walking side by side towards the west side of the village, their shadows long in the rising sunlight. Hinata's diminutive form was draped across Naruto's arms, her knees bent over his right forearm while his left supported her back. Her head rested against his shoulder, tear-stained face still red from crying but otherwise peaceful. Iruka looked down at the pair and couldn't help but smile, an expression tainted by the sadness he felt for their friend and the many citizens who had lost their lives the night before. Naruto would take care of his friends. Iruka did not need to remind him. Before long they were sitting on a bench in the park, watching the sunrise. Naruto had gently placed Hinata down on the bench, though only after Iruka chastised him did he gingerly place the girl's head on his lap. Despite the gravity of the situation, the blonde still had the presence of mind to blush a little. Of all the things he had missed out on, interaction with girls seemed to be the haziest situation for the boy. From dealing with his peers he was now aware at least that sometimes you liked one another, but that was the extent of it. Iruka had to admit that Naruto was a bit oblivious, but that was alright. They were still a bit young to be thinking about such things. Naruto was just being a good friend. Did they know who did it, sensei? Naruto asked quietly after a while, the sun's glare in his bright blue eyes. He looked older all of a sudden, much older than the 8-year-old he was. Iruka hesitated, but decided it was better he say it than the truth be overheard from gossip. Sasuke's brother, Itachi. Naruto's wide-eyed disbelief was merited. Sasuke only ever spoke highly of his brother, and Iruka knew well the genius Itachi was. Itachi. By himself. The child's brain was trying to put together how that was even possible. He knew well that there were shinobi that were skilled enough to take on a lot of enemies by themselves, but the entire Uchiha clan. Sasuke had told him vaguely how many people there were in the clan. They had their own miniature town basically. Itachi is considered a genius of the Uchiha clan, Naruto. That's why Sasuke looked up to him so much. Itachi went to the academy and graduated in only a year, at the age of 7. He became a Chunin when he was 10, an Anbu agent at 11, and was an Anbu captain at 13. Naruto's bewildered expression increased in magnitude as the Uchiha's accomplishments were listed. Most students did not even graduate from the academy until they were 11 or 12, but Sasuke's brother had been in Anbu by then. Only a genius could be admitted to the special forces at that age. He began to understand how such a thing had been possible, especially by somebody who was trusted by his people. What happens now? He asked dismally, wondering if his friend would ever be the same again. I don't know, Naruto. Iruka sighed, which elicited an incredulous look from his student. I don't know everything, kiddo, he chided gently, allowing himself to smirk. What I do know is that it will be hard. When you see Sasuke again he might not be the same. He might never be the same. I don't know what he'll do, either. But you know what you need to do. It was not a question, but Naruto nodded nonetheless. He would do what he could for Sasuke. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. 2 weeks passed without Sasuke in the classroom. No matter how many times Iruka asked after his whereabouts or how his student was, he received the same answer. He'll be back in class soon. Naruto and Hinata had put on brave faces, but there was little in the ways of laughter or even smiles those days. Naruto did his best to try and cheer his friend up, but it was difficult for many reasons. They hadn't seen Sasuke in a while. They had no idea when he was getting back, or if he was going to come back. Naruto's normal lighthearted, positive attitude remained by force of will, but it was strained. Then finally, one morning in early November, Sasuke walked into the classroom a few minutes late. Or at least, Iruka thought it was Sasuke. He no longer wore his black, long-sleeved shirt with the not quite Shino-level collar. In its place was a similarly collared short sleeve the color of cobalt, the Uchiha clan symbol sewn on the back. His forearms and lower legs were covered by white warmers with blue straps. At least the familiar white shorts completed the attire. But it was not the clothing that made Sasuke look different. It was his eyes. Sasuke stalked to his usual seat without saying a word, not even to Naruto or Hinata as they sat speechless while he passed by to sit by the window. The Uchiha survivor put his elbows on the table, wove his fingers together, and stared out the window. Sasuke always had black eyes so dark that his pupil was not even visible, but those eyes held knowledge now, years of experience and hardship in only 2 weeks. His face was devoid of emotion. It was worse than Iruka had expected. Naruto stared for a while before trying his hand at a broad grin. Sasuke. It's been. Shut up. Naruto blinked. Sasuke had not even twitched, only stated in a quiet, flat voice his desire for his friend not to speak. The blonde glanced at Hinata, who shook her head as if to say, let's leave him alone for now. The rest of the class simply stared for a while before Iruka coughed and continued the lesson, trying to give his student time to acclimate. The entire day passed without another word from him. The only time Sasuke showed emotion throughout the next day was during taijutsu practice. But the expressions were not indicative of who the boy used to be. He was ruthless in his sparring, furious at every point scored against him, and sneering at every victory. Hinata and Naruto were the only ones spared of his scorn, though they did experience his ferocity. It felt like they had never even fought him before. The Hyuga girl had only scored 1 point before Sasuke struck 3 in quick succession, not at all bothering to be soft. One blow left a bruise on Hinata's neck, the other 2 likely the same on her shoulder and torso. He did not return her bow at the conclusion. Naruto stepped up to silence, nobody daring to cheer one or the other on. He was unsure what to do as he lowered himself into his stance, waiting. Sasuke. Without warning Sasuke leapt towards him, and he swore there had been a guttural growl preceding the onslaught. It was everything he could do to keep on his feet and defend, taking 2 hits within a minute and struggling not to fall so easily. Sasuke was smirking at him the whole time in a way that made the blonde want to shudder. You and Hinata are the only ones that have a chance to get through to him. Iruka's words from the night before rang loudly in Naruto's ears. In a sudden surge of energy Naruto blocked a jab so hard it threw Sasuke off balance. In an instant it was over, with the dark-haired youth flat on his back, expressionless as if nothing had happened. Naruto stood over him, breathing hard. He was breathing hard. Hinata approached timidly to stand next to him, looking extremely nervous. Sasuke. Naruto started quietly, offering a hand to his fallen comrade. I know how hard you've had it recently, but please don't take your anger out on us. We're your friends, all of us. Kiba looked a bit begrudging but nodded from his place in the circle. Ino and Sakura both agreed emphatically, while Shino nodded silently with no change of expression. Shikamaru shrugged and muttered something about being troublesome, while Choji continued munching on his signature bag of chips. Hinata did her best to smile, but ended up flushing and looking embarrassed as usual. Iruka watched silently, proud of his students for rallying around Sasuke. I don't need friends, he said loud enough for everyone in attendance to hear. Hinata covered her mouth and took a step back, and Naruto clenched his fist. Sasuke reached up and swatted his hand away, performing a quick kip up before shoving his hands in his pockets and walking off. Iruka bit his lip and shook his head. Hinata and Naruto stood together, staring after their friend. Sasuke did not return to classes that day. In Konoha, as in most hidden villages, children were considered adults upon graduation from the academy. Generally speaking, that meant that every genin was mature enough to serve his or her village, and even die for it. However, Iruka could see in several of his students' eyes that adulthood had come early. Reality seemed to have seeped into many, the knowledge that any of them could be killed at any time forcing some to drop out. By mid-December there were 22 left. New students were brought in to take their places. It would be a waste to not fill the empty spaces. Naruto had decided to give Sasuke space. He and Hinata could do little else since Sasuke refused to associate with anybody. Instead, they trained as a pair, spending longer hours than before together. Both achieved landmark successes just before Hinata's birthday on December 27th. Naruto finally managed to mold just enough chakra to summon a single kage bunshin successfully. He had managed to make 2 or 3 before that, but Iruka had insisted he have the capability to make just 1. He, and his clone, had been so excited they had high-fived hard enough to disperse the bunshin, sending Hinata into a fit of giggles. He had to do it again to prove to Iruka he was able to. Hinata's success came in her chakra capacity and endurance, so it was a much more subtle change that Iruka had to point out to her. The young Hyuga had trained with Naruto so long that her stamina had increased rapidly without her realizing it. By late December she was able to spar at moderate intensity for almost an hour, and could go all out for a half an hour. The first time Naruto actually became winded during a match Iruka happened to be watching, and the Chunin nearly fell over laughing. Naruto had gotten worn down by the girl. While it was hilarious to him, Hinata looked incredibly self-conscious and chagrined, but after quite a bit of encouragement and praise by Naruto she finally offered a small smile and blushed appreciatively. Neither of them ever gave up on Sasuke, though. Several times a week they would invite him to come spar after classes, and every time he either did not respond or refused flatly. Against his better judgment, Naruto got frustrated one afternoon following their dismissal. As usual, they were the last in the room aside from Iruka. Sasuke, I'm tired of this, he said honestly with a sigh, slumping back into his seat while Hinata stared at the table pushing her index fingers together. Sasuke did not react. It was the middle of spring now, and they had not been together as a trio since before the Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto understood, but at the same time he did not. I know how. Don't tell me you know how I feel, Naruto, Sasuke practically hissed, gripping his own fingers tightly. You never had any parents. You never had a family. You don't know what it's like to lose everyone. Hinata choked a little, but Naruto just watched his friend closely. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I don't really know how you feel, Sasuke. But I do know that what you're doing isn't going to help solve anything. What's your goal? Across the room, pretending to be busy with his paperwork, Iruka blinked. Sasuke snorted like it was a joke. I want to kill Itachi. That's all. His voice was mechanical, flat. It was the most obvious thing in the world to him. It's the only reason I'm alive. Naruto gave him a hard look, but he ignored it. He had not been there, had not seen what Sasuke had. He had not been there when Itachi had trapped him with the Mangekyo Sharingan and tortured him, making him relive the murder of his parents over and over and over again. Fine, then let me help too. Sasuke's first show of emotion was surprise, turning to blink at his friend as if searching for an explanation. We're friends, Sasuke. If you want to kill Itachi, then I'll help you get stronger so that you can one day. Me also, Sasuke-san, Hinata inserted, looking uncomfortable but determined. Sasuke looked from one to the other, shaking his head after a moment. You guys can't help me, he said after a moment, turning back to the window. His hands were visibly shaking now, he was not telling them everything. Itachi, he began in a gruff tone, determined to stare at nothing while he spoke. He said I would have to kill my best friend in order to defeat him, in order to activate my. Sasuke hesitated, deciding against telling them the fullness of the Uchiha secret. To activate a higher level Sharingan. I can't have friends. I don't want that power. Oh, shut up, Sasuke. Naruto grinned, rolling his eyes. You're so dramatic. Come on, Hinata and I both know you're not going to try to kill us. Even if you do, we'll team up and beat some sense into you. Right, Hinata? Despite looking mortified at the suggestion, she nodded quickly. See, you can have friends, Sasuke. Just don't let your brother taunt you like that. You'll get him one day, the right way, and we'll be there to help you when that happens. A long moment passed with Sasuke's blank expression slowly softening, until the slightest of smirks graced his lips. For once in his life, the boy looked vulnerable, if only for a moment before collecting himself and nodding. Alright, I'll try. Naruto was instantly ecstatic, chattering away as they walked to the yard to train together for the first time in months. Hinata remained silent while wiping away a tear or two, smiling at her friends as they went. Iruka had kept his head down during the ordeal, but had hung on every word exchanged between the trio. He had felt pangs of sorrow, welling pride, and finally joy and relief. Without his aid they were back together again, and things could start getting back to normal and healing. Sasuke would never be the same again, he knew, and it was likely Hinata and Naruto knew as well. But they were together, and would help him get through this. The instructor's role in his students' lives was shrinking, and he knew it. Even Naruto, who had made so much progress in the last 2 years, was learning to think for himself and handle situations using his own intuition and intellect. If one of them had trouble with something, the other two would step up and provide their help. In a few years they would be out of the academy, and they would be off in the world on missions for the village. But Iruka was satisfied for the role he had played. His last act as their teacher would be to assign them into groups of 3 post-graduation, to be placed on teams with a jonin teacher that would oversee their development into chunin. For that Iruka would fight tooth and nail for, no matter the objections that might be raised. He owed it to them. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Before he knew it, summer had arrived, bringing with it daily training sessions for Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke. Iruka watched when he had the time, ever impressed at the progress his students continued to make day in and day out. Ever since they had learned of the 3 jutsus they were required to know for graduation, a portion of every day had been dedicated to their mastery. Hinata and Sasuke could easily perform their bunshin and transformation techniques, and while Naruto had never gotten the hang of the standard clone, he could reliably form anywhere from 1 to 10 kage bunshin. He also seemed to have a knack for the henge no jutsu. All 3 of them, however, needed to work on their kawarimi no jutsu. Iruka had told them that it was one of the most important. The substitution ability would save their lives in the future. You know, Iruka started carefully, eyeing the children as he approached. At this rate you 3 could probably graduate in a year or 2 instead of waiting 4 more. You'd be genin at an earlier age than most, but I think you might be ready by then. Naruto looked excited, but the enthusiasm quickly diminished as he thought on it for a moment. Sasuke shrugged and continued his chakra exercises, while Hinata looked worriedly to Naruto. I think I'd rather stay at the academy, sensei. We still have a lot we can learn there, and I like our classmates a lot. I want to graduate with them, too. Iruka had to stifle a grin, and merely nodded instead. His son's loyalty was admirable. Son. He blinked at the thought, looking down at the blonde youth that was scratching the back of his neck. It had only been 2 years, but Iruka had watched as Naruto had grown from the village's most detested delinquent to a determined, hard-working ninja in training. Konoha's citizens still sneered and grimaced at him, still hated him for all the wrong reasons, but he had stayed strong throughout. Iruka was proud to be Naruto's guardian and mentor, and maybe one day would allow himself to consider the boy as family. The chunin turned with a wave, walking slowly back to his apartment and into the light of the setting sun. It was no time to be thinking of things like that, he chided himself. They were already growing up. He made a mental note to talk to Naruto soon about how to treat young women. The way Hinata was starting to look at the blonde boy told him that it would be a necessary conversation. Chapter 4. Secrets. Time seemed to race by in the aftermath of the Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto and his friends all had goals to work towards. Sasuke sought revenge for his clan, Hinata worked for recognition from her father, and Naruto continued to seek the post of Hokage. All 3 knew what it would take to accomplish their dreams, and each was willing to sacrifice to help the others obtain theirs. With this mindset they trained, honing their skills on one another throughout their years at the academy. Almost 3 years had passed since the group had been reunited. Each of them had mastered the 3 required jutsu, except Naruto. He had long since given up on the bunshin no jutsu after Iruka insisted that the kage bunshin technique would be more than sufficient to pass the final exams. Following their successes in ninjutsu, the group took it upon themselves to learn more. Hinata had been taught of elemental jutsus by her father at the Hyuga estate, sharing the information with her companions. Sasuke, of course, seemed to have a knack for fire techniques, having already mastered one of them at a young age. The other two didn't know what affinity they possessed, so simply learning simple techniques was the only way to go about it. Over the course of time, each of them picked up additional jutsus. Naruto had the most difficult time with this, learning 2 basic survival techniques to the 3 or 4 his friends accomplished. They were both wind-based. One erased scents while the other got rid of tracks. Sasuke naturally picked up the jutsus for lighting fires and self-heating for cold climates. However, to their surprise, he also learned a few lightning-style techniques with relative ease. His pride was kept in check by his own advice, however, noting that the abilities they were learning were all non-combat and their usefulness extended only so far. Hinata struggled with the elemental jutsus, although not to the same extent Naruto had. She chose, by elimination more or less, to master the water-based jutsus, and after much painstaking practice she finally managed it. She was, however, the only one of their group besides Sasuke that was able to pick up an offensive technique, an earth-style ability that ruptured the ground around a target, preventing movement by trapping their feet. It worked surprisingly well in conjunction with Sasuke's fireball. After 3 years, it was not difficult to tell which of them had the advantage in taijutsu. Although Sasuke and Hinata's stamina had increased dramatically, neither could match Naruto's endurance. By the time they were all 10 years old, he was able to spar them both to exhaustion with energy to spare. The blonde knew that what he lacked in chakra manipulation he would have to make up for with his taijutsu, and as such focused his efforts on more advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques. Training aside, Naruto had branched out from his group and befriended a few other of his classmates. He got along with Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba fairly well, but despite his best efforts it was hard to get even a nod out of Shino, let alone a conversation. Ino and Sakura seemed to despise him for getting in their way, or something, although it seemed the majority of their vehemence was directed at Hinata. In their mind, she was competition for Sasuke, and as the only female the Uchiha spent time with, she was a prime target for their spite. Sasuke had no interest in making additional friends or returning the affections of his admirers. Hinata seemed content with her 2 friends, though she was still painfully shy even with them. No amount of interaction or encouragement seemed to help. Naruto was eternally vexed at this, but resolved just to be the best friend he could be in the absence of others. Every time she looked at him, a light blush sprang up unbidden, forcing her eyes back to the ground. Iruka had told him that it meant she liked him, and when the boy matter-of-factly stated he liked her too, his teacher had just shaken his head and said it wasn't the same. Whatever. He would figure it out later. Shortly after Sasuke's 11th birthday, at the beginning of their 5th year, Iruka announced to the class that survival training would commence in September. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. This week is the 10th training ground, right? Naruto asked between bowls of ramen. It was October 10th, 5 weeks into their survival training program, and they had decided to celebrate Naruto's birthday at Ichiraku's. It was rare that Hinata and Sasuke were with Naruto around so many people, and it was the first time they had been on his birthday. Yes, I think so, Hinata said quietly, staring down at her untouched bowl and looking overtly concerned. The girl had changed her normal outfit from years before, favoring a slightly oversized beige coat and a pair of dark capris. The new attire was not on her mind, however, and neither was the upcoming survival training. As they had taken the day off of training and spent more time in the bustle of the village, the Hyuga heiress had noticed more harsh looks towards Naruto than usual. It had always bothered her, the way they looked at her friend and muttered curses as he passed. But today was different than most days. More than one individual had openly sneered at Naruto, one going so far as to say he was a demon child. Naruto had simply ignored them like always. He said Iruka didn't like him getting upset with those people. But it upset her. Naruto-kun, she started hesitantly, cursing herself for stuttering. People seem more cruel to you today. I mean, more than they usually are. Hinata trailed off dismally, both depressed for her friend's sake and helpless to come up with a solution, or even a reason why. It's always like that on my birthday, Hinata-chan, he stated matter-of-factly. He failed to notice the furious blush on his friend's face as a result of the added suffix, something he had started doing a year before. In truth, it was not something he thought about much. For whatever reason, the citizens of Konoha expressed greater distaste for Naruto around October 10th. It's not a big deal, he shrugged, slurping down a mouthful of noodles from his miso-flavored ramen. Better to just ignore them anyway, Sasuke grunted, stretching on his stool. Hinata bit her lip, glancing at her dark-haired friend before looking back down at the counter. She had watched Naruto over the years with her Byakugan, noting the steady increase in the red chakra she had first noticed years earlier. The more she considered it, the further convinced she was that it was the source of her friend's travails. Sasuke shared her concerns in a way, but he didn't seem concerned about getting to the bottom of it. As far as he was concerned, if it made Naruto a stronger person, the villagers' attitudes might even be considered a boon. But Hinata could see it, even if Sasuke refused to. In the same way that Sasuke had hardened a mask of apathy over the years, Naruto had created one of nonchalance and humor. She admired Naruto in the fact that, despite adversity, he put on a brave face day after day and tried his hardest, no matter what. If only she could be so brave. I'll meet you both at the park. I have something to take care of. With a rushed bow to Ichiraku's owner, Tsuki, she rushed off into the busy streets, a few coins left by her untouched bowl. Naruto watched after her for a moment before turning back to the counter, looking down at his noodles pensively. He felt uncomfortable, for some reason. Naruto. The chastising tone came from within the shop. Ayame, Tsuki's daughter, stalked out of the kitchen with her hands on her hips. What did you do to upset that girl? Her father sighed, waving a hand at her and cutting in before she could continue. Naruto didn't do anything, Ayame. When have you ever known our Naruto to be mean? The kindly middle-aged man smiled at the blonde, who returned his grin appreciatively. True, Dad, but that doesn't mean he knows how to handle a girl's feelings. You'd better be careful, hear me. Her eyes shot daggers at the boy before softening and winking. Ayame liked him almost as much as her father, and the berating she afforded him only proved as much. I'm just kidding, Naruto. Would you and your friend like another bowl on the house? It's your birthday, after all. Sasuke turned her down, though Naruto took up her offer enthusiastically. He would figure out what was up with Hinata later. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Hinata had quickly made her way to the library, ducking her head as she passed the front desk to search the archives. She had gone there once or twice for the same purpose, as her family library did not seem to have the information she sought. After a fruitless search in the history section, finding books going back about 10 years, skipping a few, and continuing through antiquity, she timidly approached one of the library's keepers. Anyo. Excuse me, she started, drawing a hard stare before the librarian recognized her and bowed respectfully. Hinata always felt uncomfortable when people's attitudes changed upon realizing her heritage. I can't seem to find any information regarding the end of the Third War, specifically about our village, she began innocently enough, willing her stutter away. There's some vague information about a Kyuubi no Kitsune destroying Konoha, but there aren't many details. Are there any records of our village near that time, about 11 years ago? The keeper gave Hinata a long, flat look before responding coolly. That information is classified. Only a shinobi of higher rank than Chunin can access it. I apologize for the inconvenience, miss. Another bow signaled the end of the conversation, leaving a confused girl to distress over what it meant. She had accepted that her father had been unable to disclose the information to her, as it appeared Sasuke's had. If the adults could not tell them under any circumstance, that meant it was a law rather than a well-kept secret. But what kind of law demanded that an entire period of Konoha history be kept secret from the public? And what did this have to do with Naruto? Hinata left the library with more questions than when she had arrived, head spinning with possibilities but none of them leading her to an answer. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. A few days later their class was gathered in the yard outside of the academy, all sporting small packs that only carried camping equipment. Many of the students were buzzing excitedly, while others seemed disinterested or even worried. All right everyone, Iruka said brightly as he strode towards them, clipboard in hand with a small pack of his own. As you know, we're going to be spending 3 days in Training Ground 10, which is along the eastern outskirts of the village. Unlike our previous survival training, this is a solo exercise, so there will be no teams here. A collective groan and a few worried glances met his announcement. Now don't worry too much. Myself and Mizuki-sensei will be patrolling the area to make sure nothing happens. Area 10 is about 24 square kilometers of dense forest, but there are no inherent dangers outside of your normal wild animals. And let me make this clear. Although we are not setting limited boundaries for you, we expect you to avoid your classmates. If we find that you have been allying with one another to complete the exercise, all offending parties will receiving a failing grade. Am I clear? Everybody nodded. Good. Then follow me. 10 minutes later they all stood in front of the entrance to a vast forest, surrounded only with wooden stakes every few dozen meters to mark the training area. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, adjusting his pack as he chatted with Sasuke and Hinata for a few minutes before they were to enter. The majority of it was him talking at them, as per usual. This is going to be fun, he remarked in a bubbly fashion, bouncing on the balls of his feet. I doubt the rest of the class has learned even half the survival techniques we have. This'll be no problem. Sasuke nodded before looking off into the forest, seeming uninterested. Hinata looked worried, and although that was a normal look for her, it seemed a bit more pronounced today. You all right, Hinata-chan? Startled, as if snapped out of a reverie, the girl blushed and nodded quickly, pushing her index fingers together and staring at the ground. Naruto made a face and looked towards Iruka. All right, half of you will be staying here with me. The rest of you follow Mizuki-sensei to the opposite end of the forest. We've synchronized our watches, so at 9 sharp everybody will enter the forest at once. I expect you all to disperse immediately, understood? A chorus of, yes sensei, and the silver-haired Chunin, Mizuki, nodded, calling out names to follow him before dashing around the perimeter. Hinata breathed a sigh of relief when she was chosen to follow Mizuki with Naruto. Sasuke afforded them a small smirk as they ran off. It took about 15 minutes to circumvent the forest, but they arrived with 10 minutes to spare until the departure time. The Hyuga girl stood fidgeting next to Naruto, jumping as she felt his hand touch her shoulder. Hey, relax Hinata-chan. I know you'll do great, he said with a big, squinty-eyed smile. Despite her flush, she returned the smile meekly. Naruto had a way of making her feel better, even with so much on her mind. All right, 30 seconds to go, Mizuki drawled, sounding bored. Remember, no working together. And, he continued, eyes traveling over Naruto and lingering for a moment. Be careful out there. Hinata bit her lip, but there was no time for questions or comments. The Chunin gave the signal and they were off, darting into the trees and scattering in every direction. Be safe, Naruto-kun. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. A day had passed uneventfully in the forest. Naruto sat dozing against a tree in his small camp in the approaching twilight, his small tent and the remainder of a fire nearby. He had been forced to start the fire manually using some flint and tinder, something Sasuke would never have to do. But he had managed, and after catching a rabbit for dinner and doing some exploring he had quickly fallen asleep. Survival training was pretty boring, after all. A light rustling nearby roused him immediately, instincts kicking in as he stood into a crouch, kunai clutched in one hand. His eyes darted around, trying to find where the noise had come from when a fistful of shuriken streaked towards him from a tree across the small clearing. He rolled to the side, slightly panicked at being attacked. A classmate would not use weapons against him, so who could it be? Naruto had gotten used to death threats, and there had even been a few attempts on his life in the orphanage. But since living with Iruka the attacks had ceased, and now was the first time the boy had felt his life threatened in years. Well, looks like the demon is quick on his feet. Mizuki dropped from a nearby tree, flanked by 2 shinobi who also wore vests indicating their rank as Chunin. One was a heavy-set, stocky man brandishing a weighty club. The other was a wicked-looking woman that looked to be in her mid-20s. Her weapon of choice was a short, curved sword drawn from a sheath on her back. Mizuki had two giant shurikens strapped to his back and was currently spinning a kunai on the index finger of each hand. Naruto could feel their killing intent from where he stood. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto yelled quickly, summoning as many clones as he could manage. 30 clones, all armed with kunai, crouched in front of the oncoming group. 3 Chunin. 1 me, 30 clones to work with. The odds were stacked against him. He knew, the Bunshin were much sturdier than regular clones and could act on their own in a way, but a solid blow would disperse them. Naruto knew that he had trained hard for the last several years, but these were 3 that had been ninjas for longer than he had been alive. They had the advantage of experience, and were likely stronger than him individually. What did I ever do to you? One of the clones growled contemptuously, edging forward slightly. The rest muttered agreement, as if they had all been poised to ask the same thing. The real Naruto waited, watching and worrying. What did you do? Mizuki laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. Why, you destroyed half the village, killed the 4th Hokage, and murdered countless others. Including Iruka sensei's parents. Mizuki, the male crony muttered, glancing around nervously. That's against. So, the boy's about to die. He may as well learn of his heritage. The silver-haired Chunin grinned, eyes flashing in the fading light. Without warning he flung the 2 kunai mid-spin, piercing 4 clones in total. In a fluid motion he had detached one of the monstrous shuriken from his back and flung it hard, and despite efforts to dodge another handful of Bunshin vanished in puffs of smoke. 18 Narutos remained. I'm not a demon. Naruto shouted, letting a fist of shuriken fly followed closely by his kunai. Several of the clones threw their weapons as well. Mizuki dodged most of them without issue, though was forced to deflect several with another kunai. His allies were not as quick, the woman rolling to the side with a gash on one arm, the stocky man growling and pulling a shuriken from his thigh. Oh yes you are, Naruto-kun. He threw more shuriken, piercing 3 more clones. With only 15 Bunshin remaining, Naruto decided he had to act. He tried to ignore Mizuki's taunting as his clones engaged the 2 Chunin, leaving his instructor to walk slowly towards him. 11 years ago the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha. It nearly destroyed everything, and would have if the Yondaime had not sacrificed his life to protect the village. He sealed the demon inside of a newborn, a child born October 10, 11 years ago. Naruto was desperately trying not to listen, but the words pierced through his concentration. The villagers' murmurs and curses made sense. Damn fox. Demon. Destroyer. Separately they had not meant much, but together they corroborated Mizuki's taunting. And the red chakra. Shut up. Naruto shouted, another kunai in his hand as he charged forward. To Mizuki's surprise the boy was not a pushover, forcing him to actively defend himself from a bout of skillful taijutsu interwoven with thrusts and slashes from the kunai. Hey kid, you're not bad. Too bad you're just too inexperienced. As Naruto thrust forward, burying his blade into the man, he gasped. Mizuki had vanished in a cloud of smoke, a log left in his place, inside of which Naruto's kunai had been lodged. The boy turned, but not fast enough. An intense stab of pain caused him to stagger forward, the oversized shuriken protruding from his back. Too easy. His remaining clones dispersed, though only 3 had lasted that long. The 2 Chunin appeared to be panting, not having expected the Bunshin to put up such a fight. The furious Kunoichi was a little worse for wear, sporting multiple cuts and gashes, whereas her male counterpart had inflicted only minor injuries. I'm gonna kill this kid, she growled. Now, we have to make this quick or else we'll be discovered, Mizuki droned, bored. You both get 1 shot each before I finish him. Be sure not to kill him. That privilege is mine alone. Naruto was on his knees, breathing hard. The Kage Bunshin technique had taken a lot of chakra, more than he had expected. On top of that, he had expended the majority of his projectiles and was losing blood fast. Mizuki approached casually, and though Naruto attempted to struggle to his feet, the man viciously yanked the weapon from his back. He gasped, falling back to the ground and coughing up blood. Me first, the woman scowled, stepping forward with her sword drawn. With a ruthless thrust the blade pierced through his shoulder near the collarbone, cutting into the bone on its way through his body. Naruto ground his teeth together, trying and failing not to cry out. His scream was interrupted by a fit of coughs, splattering more of his blood on the forest floor. The woman smirked and left the sword in, striding away and looking satisfied. The other Chunin approached with little ceremony. Channeling chakra into his club, he swung it hard, catching Naruto in the chest. A sickening crunch seemed to echo around the small clearing. Naruto was launched up and backwards, slamming into a tree and dislocating his shoulder. Before he could fall to the ground, 8 of Mizuki's shuriken pinned his limbs to the tree trunk. I've been waiting to see this for years, Uzumaki Naruto. Or should I say Kyuubi no Kitsune? Either way, it's time to rid you from our village once and for all. A kunai appeared in the man's hand, light from the sinking sun glinting off of the blade menacingly. Naruto was barely conscious. His vision was hazy and marred by blood that had dripped into his eyes. He could hardly even see the kunai that was threatening to finish him off, but he knew it was there. He could hear Mizuki's voice, like an echo coming from far off. But he knew. Can't die. Not yet. Have to help Sasuke. Have to. Hokage. Hinata. 2. Can't. Doden. Earth rupture. A breathless voice yelled from the trees. Mizuki leapt into the air as soon as he recognized the jutsu, snarling as he was forced to backflip away from his prey. His 2 comrades were either caught off guard or too injured to move, because both found their legs trapped in a mixture of earth and rock that had sprung from the ground. Mizuki cast around frantically for the source before glaring back at Naruto. He could at least finish the job before retreating. He fired off 2 kunai at the incapacitated boy. A small form shot from the underbrush, reaching Naruto in a blur of speed and deflecting the 2 projectiles with a kunai. The trapped blonde could not even lift his head to see what was going on, his half-lidded eyes only able to make out the furry hem of a tan jacket and a pair of dark pants, cut off below the knee. Hinata stood in a ready stance directly in front of Naruto, breathing harder than normal and struggling to maintain control of her emotions. With the help of her Byakugan she had watched the scene unfold, cursing her legs for their inability to carry her faster than the dead sprint she had been moving at. She choked back tears. Even without looking she could see her friend's condition clearly. The Hyuga bloodline ability provided nearly 360-degree vision. I made it, she breathed, trying desperately to calm herself. She had chosen a location to camp that had been within the maximum range of her Byakugan from Naruto, and although she had felt silly about it at the time she now thanked whatever gods that existed for their aid. Cute. The demon's girlfriend comes to the rescue. I don't have time for this. Mizuki grunted, pulling both shuriken from his back and releasing them towards the girl, one after another with the second hovering just below the first. Hinata. Naruto barely whispered, his collapsed lung working against any attempt to speak. Run. He coughed weakly, more blood dripping from his lips. Hinata clenched her jaw and pulled out another kunai, shaking her head violently. I won't. It was the most forceful thing the girl had ever said. I won't just let you die. She knew that stopping both massive projectiles would be nearly impossible on her own, but she had to try. If she moved they would strike Naruto head-on, ensuring his demise. No, she would stop them. She had to. As the whirling blades approached she channeled as much chakra as she could into her hands, forcing it into the kunai. The blades vibrated violently, not meant to hold chakra, but it was all she had. The first shuriken struck her hard, grinding against the chakra-enhanced blades that were crossed in front of her. She ground her teeth and was forced back a half-meter, and despite the burning in her limbs she let one hand drop. The released pressure brought the spinning weapon centimeters from her neck, held back just barely by a trembling arm. She grunted as the second shuriken impacted, striking at the lowered weapon in front of her torso. It was too much, as expected. Hinata's feet dragged against the dirt, heels forced back until they touched the tree holding Naruto. The second shuriken was already burning into her side, blood splattering backwards. She cried out in pain, and her kunai shattered. Her chakra-infused hands were the only things holding them back now, skin tearing from her palms from the incredible friction. This was it. She was going to die. One last thought flit through her mind as the rotating blades reached her throat. At least I can die with him. And then the pressure was gone. Hinata collapsed at the base of the tree, blue flames flickering from her bleeding palms as she sagged against the base of the tree. Her breath was ragged, but aside from the deep gash in her side she was unharmed. She cast around her enhanced vision quickly, her pounding head making it take a little longer to locate her rescuer. Sasuke-san. The Uchiha stood several meters to the side, both shuriken spinning in his hands. His eyes were hard on Mizuki, cold and calculating. Hinata had been so focused on stopping the weapons that she had not seen him fly in from the side to snatch the weapons away. Stay with Naruto, Hinata-san. I'll take it from here. She nodded tiredly, unable to move at the moment even if she had the desire to. Sasuke spread his arms, launching the blades back at their owner with deadly precision. Mizuki was forced to dodge away, the shuriken slicing into the tree he had been standing in. Kaden. Great fireball. Instead of aiming at Mizuki, Sasuke had fired the massive flame at the two immobilized ninja who had been struggling to free themselves since being captured moments earlier. A pair of screams rent the air as the fireball passed and dissipated, leaving two scorched, twitching bodies behind. They were not dead, but their burns would effectively take them out of the fight. I get how the Hyuga got here, but how did a brat like you find us? The Chunin asked in an exasperated tone, wrinkling his nose at the smell of scorched flesh. Seeing his comrades taken down did not seem to bother him in the least. I was searching for a water source when I saw you pass by, Sasuke responded evenly, fingers curling into fists. It seemed suspicious that you had two other Chunin with you, so I followed. You shouldn't be so careless. Whatever. 2 down, 1 to go. Mizuki snarled, landing across the clearing from Sasuke. I was thinking the same thing, sensei, he said coolly, crouching into a taijutsu stance. I don't know why you want to kill Naruto, but I won't let you lay another finger on him or Hinata-san. Unwilling to let Mizuki respond, he rushed forward and attacked. I really hate kids, Mizuki grunted after receiving a solid blow to his stomach, returning a kick that brushed Sasuke's chin. For kids, they weren't bad. But they were still kids. He was better than them. He knew it. Doden. Earth Fist. Sasuke grunted as the blow crushed his block and struck his shoulder, sending him careening back into the center of the clearing. He managed to land on his feet, but his arm hung limply at his side and his breathing was labored. Mizuki appeared to be having difficulties breathing now as well, having manipulated his large shuriken several times and fought 2 opponents, on top of being forced to use a more advanced earth-style jutsu. Alright. Enough playing. Sit down, kid. Doden. Earth Rupture. He pushed a palm to the ground, forcing the ground around Sasuke up and capturing a leg before he could leap away. Now stay there and watch. I'm going to kill the demon and your friend now, and then I'll come back to you. Get back here and fight me, you bastard. Sasuke shouted, striking at the rocks about his leg, struggling to break free. Not again. Not again. Not again. You'll get yours soon. First I'm gonna have some fun with little Miss Hyuga here. Mizuki's smirk could only be described as evil. He approached Hinata with deliberate slowness, eyeing her up and down. You know, you're pretty well developed for your age. I might actually enjoy this. He laughed, a sound that chilled the helpless girl to her bones. But she couldn't move. All she could do was glare defiantly at him, pressing herself back against the tree. Naruto's vision was going dark, and the sounds he could hear were muffled. He could see the way Mizuki was looking at Hinata, however, and it made him angry. He held on to the anger as if it were a lifeline, pouring his hate into it. Every shred of scorn and loathing that had built up over the years was suddenly boiling over. His vision gained a red tint, and then everything went dark. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Uzumaki Naruto. A voice rumbled in a dull roar, rousing him. Every centimeter of his being felt like it was on fire as he slowly sat up, wondering why everything was so wet. Uzumaki Naruto. The voice came again, louder this time. Why did it sound so familiar? Naruto glanced around as he stood, jaw dropping as he saw the massive gate he had woken in front of. The ceiling of the colossal room disappeared into darkness, as did the rust-colored bars of what appeared to be a prison cell. A large square paper was placed over where the two sides of the gate met, the word, seal, written plainly on it. Beyond the gate lay complete blackness, save for a pair of giant crimson eyes. The pupils were barely visible slits. Uzumaki Naruto. The roar nearly knocked him over, a wave of pure hate washing over him from inside of the cell. Answer me, you damned brat. If you don't do so quickly, you and I are both dead. Who? What are you? He asked hesitantly. His head hurt. Everything hurt. Where was this? How did he get there? Where's Hinata? And Sasuke? Where are my friends? He was panicking, looking around wildly and all but ignoring the menacing chuckle that shook the room. Fool. You're a hair's breadth from death and you think of your friends. I'd love to talk, but right now you need me or you and your friends will die, which means I die too. Come over here. Why should I trust you? Naruto's mind was racing, trying to put everything together. At every turn he was brought back to the only thing that made sense, the demon. This was his demon. Mizuki had been telling the truth. He suddenly felt sick, lurching forward and dry heaving into the shallow water. You don't have a choice, idiot. Look, I'm not trying to escape, I'll work on that later. Right now, we need to live. Now get your imbecilic ass over here before your girlfriend gets gutted, or worse. Naruto stiffened, straightening slowly. He had no idea where he was helpless to escape, and the last thing he remembered was Mizuki walking up to Hinata and taking her arm. Was he dead? He shook his head, taking a step forward, then another. Moving was difficult, for some reason. A moment later he was directly in front of the gate, staring into one of the giant irises. A single claw extended from the darkness, reaching slowly through the space between the bars. It hovered a moment less than a meter from him, before plunging straight through his chest. The world spun, and a mad cackle roared in his ears as everything faded away again. Don't die, kid. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Hinata pulled futilely on the arm Mizuki held, tears leaping to her eyes unbidden. I can't cry. I won't. Naruto-kun wouldn't like that. Naruto-kun. She couldn't help it. A choked sob racked her diminutive form as the sinister Chunin reached for her neck. This was it. She was going to die crying. How pitiful. Father was right. I don't deserve to be the heiress. I don't. She blinked. Mizuki had frozen, hand so close to her neck that he could feel the heat from his palm. Instead of focusing on her, his eyes were bulging, staring at something behind her. And then she felt it. A massive chakra spike unlike anything she had ever experienced. If she had not already been on the ground, it would have brought her to her knees. The rocks surrounding Sasuke and the defected Chunin crumbled. Slowly, she turned her head, not trusting the Byakugan to see for her. Hinata's breath caught in her throat. Naruto-kun. A shroud of red chakra enveloped Naruto, surging around him and spiking at odd angles. The shuriken pinning him to the tree dissolved inside of the malevolent chakra, and Naruto fell to the ground on all fours. He was so close to Hinata that she could hear the bones grinding together as he moved, and she could see his wounds sizzling shut. The chakra was pouring out of him like a fountain, and she could see the strange seal on his torso from where it seemed to come. Frozen in fear, she merely stared at her friend, wide-eyed and unable to speak. Sasuke had fallen to his knees as the wave of killing intent hit him, his eyes locked on Naruto, disbelief painted all across his features. Naruto. He could say nothing else. Never had he seen anything like this from his friend, or anyone else for that matter. The power radiating from the blonde was otherworldly. All at once the aura faded, fiery chakra dissipating to leave only a thin veil surrounding Naruto. He was standing tall, staring at Mizuki with his head cocked to the side. His face was contorted in what appeared to be a feral snarl. The nails on his hands had grown to what appeared to be claws, and the whisker-like scars on his face had broadened. But it was his eyes that held the most terror. Naruto's bright blue eyes that always held so much hope and joy were now the color of blood, pupils reduced to vertical slits like that of some demon. Mizuki staggered backwards, falling to the ground with a frightened cry. It told you. You're a demon. Get away. Get away. He was trying to scramble to his feet and flee. Hinata would never forget the horrid grin that graced her friend's lips at that moment. Neither Sasuke or Hinata had seen him move, but suddenly Naruto was next to Mizuki. With a sickening crunch, the Chunin was launched into the air, his ribs crushed with a single kick from the enraged youth. Before he had flown out of reach, he was caught, Naruto's claws digging deep into his shoulder and preventing him from moving further away. The bloodthirsty grin did not falter. Mizuki was thrust towards the ground, forming a small crater with the force and fracturing nearly every bone on the left side of his body. Blood spilled from his mouth as broken ribs punctured his lungs. It had all happened so fast that Hinata and Sasuke were barely able to follow it. Now, however, Naruto slowly lifted the broken shinobi into the air by his neck, ignoring the gurgling pleas. He pulled a fist back and chambered it, eyes boring into the barely struggling query. "Any last words?" Naruto snarled, echoing the man's words from minutes earlier. Mizuki's one working eye went wide in terror as the boy smirked again. Naruto's killing intent had not diminished since the strange ability had activated. As a matter of fact, it had increased, and now felt like a heavy blanket of pressure on the whole clearing. "Naruto-kun," Hinata gasped, causing him to falter, crimson eyes traveling slowly to her. "Don't do it, please," she pleaded, almost sobbing. "It's enough. You won. Please, just put him down. We're safe now. Please." Her body shook as a fresh wave of sorrow took her. It was too painful to watch. Her best friend, the boy she admired more than anybody, had turned into something he was not. He was ready to kill that man in cold blood even after nearly beating him to death. The battle was won, but Naruto's bloodthirst was palpable. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the air. This wasn't Naruto. "Please," she cried one last time. Naruto glared at the girl and his face contorted, as if having a sudden emotional conflict. He turned back towards Mizuki and grinned, and for a moment seemed like he was going to strike the finishing blow. But instead the Chunin fell to the ground in a pitiful twitching heap, Naruto's fist falling to his side. Slowly the red glow faded, his nails reverting back to their original state. The last to change were his eyes, shifting from red to blue, then back again several times before finally settling on the familiar aquamarine. And then he was falling. The last thing he remembered was Sasuke running to his side and Hinata calling his name. Then everything got cold, and the world spun into blackness. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The first thing he heard sounded like worried whispers which stopped abruptly as his finger twitched. Everything hurt, from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. Breathing was difficult and swallowing felt like drinking fire. There was a foreign pressure near his side and in his palm, but for a time his eyelids felt too heavy to open and check what they were. An uncomfortable light shone from somewhere above him. He was tired. Sleep took him over again. The second time he roused, things hurt less, but the pressure was still there. There was no light this time, thankfully. Slowly, painfully, he opened his eyes. Naruto was resting on a hospital bed, with a curtain drawn around him and a window nearby. It was dark outside, but the moonlight let him see that nearly every part of him was wrapped in bandages or in a cast. He tried to move his arm, but quickly found that it was a mistake. A soft gasp escaped him as pain shot up from his fingers to the base of his neck. Something stirred near his other arm, and he glanced down to find the source. Hinata lay asleep in a chair next to him, her head resting near his side, one of her bandaged hands tucked into the cast on his hand. There were dark circles under her eyes and the sheets near her face were wet. He could see bandages through the gash in her coat as well. Naruto watched her for a time, several different emotions vying for his attention before he finally tore his eyes away. Sasuke was there as well, sleeping silently in an armchair near the window. Tears burned as they fell down Naruto's face. His sad smile was only the slightest upward twitch at the corner of his mouth. They're safe. It was the only thought in his mind as he closed his eyes, calm replacing the overwhelming sadness and pain that racked his soul. As long as they were safe, everything was all right. Even if he had killed Mizuki, even if he was a demon, even if he had died, his friends were safe. That comfort carried him back to a fitful slumber, with nightmares of demon eyes haunting him for hours. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Oh, Hinata-chan, that hurts. Naruto flinched, though couldn't help but smile. It had been a week since the incident with Mizuki and he was healing fast, already out of his casts and just waiting for the major internal injuries to fully repair. Hinata and Sasuke had returned to classes a few days prior, but rather than train as Naruto insisted, they always came to his room after with Iruka. Sorry, Naruto-kun, she stammered, turning a deep shade of pink and stepping back. It was the first time they had seen him without his casts, and the girl had been overcome with the desire to hug her friend out of a mix of joy and relief at seeing his recovery. She slid back off of the bed to sit, pressing her index fingers together, staring at the floor and looking every bit as embarrassed as she felt. It's all right. Just try not to hug so hard next time, he joked lightly, grinning at Sasuke, who was standing near the base of the bed. How are classes going, glove boy? Very funny, Sasuke remarked dryly, but cracked a smirk despite himself. His forearm was still covered in the plaster cast and held up by a sling. It's not my fault I can't recover freakishly fast from my bones shattering. Classes are boring as always, though just a good amount worse since I can't spar. He grimaced at his arm before taking a seat and leaning against the wall with a sigh. When did your medic nin say you could be released? The question came from Iruka this time, who had been standing behind Sasuke. He was putting on a brave face like he always did visiting Naruto. In truth, he was riddled with guilt for what had happened to his students. He knew, deep down, that it had not been his fault, but he was responsible for their lives while they were at the academy. He wasn't sure if he would ever forgive himself. Another week at best, Naruto lamented, making a face and throwing his hands in the air, an action he immediately regretted for the spikes of pain it sent through his healing pectorals. He winced and quickly moved his arms back down, grinning foolishly. You had better not try to leave early, Iruka lectured sternly to his sullen charge. It's your responsibility to heal up quickly so you can resume your training. You only have 1 year left after this. Iruka-sensei, Sasuke interrupted suddenly, causing the three present to turn to him curiously. The boy had become quieter since Itachi's betrayal, but he had been particularly withheld in the last week. His next statement surprised everybody more than the interruption had. Could you give us a few minutes to talk? Iruka blinked, glancing at Naruto for a moment before nodding slowly. Sure, Sasuke. I need to head to a meeting soon anyway. I'll see you two tomorrow. And Naruto, he continued, hesitating at the entrance to the room. Get some rest. Don't keep your friend up too long, you two. With a smile and a wave he was gone, the door sliding shut behind him. Sasuke stood and drew the curtain around Naruto's bed so that they couldn't be seen from the hallway. He walked slowly back to his chair and sat down heavily, rubbing his temples with his uninjured hand. Naruto, I can't put the question off anymore. As he started speaking, Naruto averted his gaze opposite both of his friends, mouth turning down into a rare frown. He knew what was coming. It had only been a matter of time. What was that thing? What happened in the woods that day? The silence rang loudly in their ears for a time as Naruto struggled with a response. Hinata was biting her lip and looking from Sasuke to Naruto, worry etched on her smooth features. Finally he shrugged, another action he regretted immediately. I don't know, he answered in partial honesty, still not meeting either of his friend's eyes. I just got really mad all of a sudden when Mizuki-sensei went for Hinata-chan. It felt like drowning in anger or something. Mizuki isn't our sensei anymore. And that doesn't explain the red chakra that was leaking out of you, or that insane speed and strength. And your eyes, why were they red? Naruto blinked several times, and it took a moment for him to notice that he was blinking back tears of frustration. I don't remember most of it. I remember going for him, then lifting him up, and then Hinata-chan's voice. After that I blacked out again. It was an honest answer, even if not what Sasuke was asking. Everything was muddled in his head, but he knew what had happened. Hinata's hand twitched in her lap, like it wanted to move somewhere but lacked the strength or courage. Mizuki called you a demon, Sasuke stated flatly, scowling at him. It's the same thing I've heard the villagers call you. Before last week I just took it as run-of-the-mill insults, but now I'm not so sure. Does this have to do with the secret none of the adults will talk about? Probably, Naruto said tightly, gritting his teeth. Look, I don't want to talk about it. It's none of your business. He was glaring at wall still, but there was a frightened look in his eyes that Hinata could barely make out. Sasuke just looked at him hard, considering pushing the topic further. Fine. Sasuke rose from his chair, pulled back the curtain. I'll see you tomorrow. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him moments later. Naruto continued his staring contest with the wall, trying not to let a fresh wave of tears have their way. A timid hand touched his and he turned back to Hinata, her eyes shimmering with the same unshed tears. I guess you want to know if I'm a demon too, he spat miserably, hating himself as soon as the words left his mouth. Her hand retreated a small distance and she gave him a look that made him feel like he had just stabbed her. But surprisingly her hand moved back to his, tenderly slipping her fingers past his palm and gripping tightly. I know you're not a demon, Naruto-kun, she said softly, willing her eyes to stay on his. Flashes of the once bloodthirsty spheres played in her vision but she pushed them away, looking only to the Naruto she knew and cared for. Why you don't have to tell me about it if you don't want to. But Naruto-kun, she started with more passion than she knew was inside of her, it doesn't matter what happened. We know who you are. Don't let Mizuki's words get to you. Naruto stared at his friend for a long moment. She had seen him mercilessly bring a man near to his death, ready and willing to strike the final blow. She had looked into his eyes he knew had been wholly demonic and sinister. She had seen, yet still looked past it, still saw Naruto instead of the beast he had become. Iruka's words echoed in his mind as he watched her blush deepen by the second. Those people can't see the real you, Naruto. They can't see past their bias and who they think you are. You are only as good or bad as you decide to be. It's what you decide that matters, not what they think. Thanks, Hinata-chan, he said finally, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. He winced, but still smiled. She turned several shades darker and looked down, causing Naruto to lift an eyebrow and wonder what he had said wrong. After another mistake of a shrug, he leaned back and closed his eyes. He chatted with Hinata about medical jutsus until he dozed off, leaving her to watch him with what might as well be permanently pink cheeks. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. A week later Naruto was released from the hospital. He had been kept a few days after the medical nins had deemed him dischargeable to ensure he was healed completely. The staff was baffled at the speed at which he healed, though it didn't keep them from giving him nasty looks on the way out. All three had been interrogated by a frightening man named Ibiki, although the evidence was fairly conclusive that the Chunin had been at fault. Everybody seemed curious as to how the battle had ended, so they pinned the victory on the only one of them that had been standing at the end. Sasuke had allegedly finished off Mizuki with an earth-style jutsu that had crushed the man more violently than intended. In the end they were cleared to leave and hoped to never have to encounter the interrogator again. He received a generally warm reception returning to the academy. Even Shino approached him and nodded in acknowledgement. Things returned to normal quickly, with the group falling into their normal routine but with renewed vigor. Although Iruka insisted they had fought incredibly against three much higher-ranked ninja, they were all determined to improve themselves in light of being beaten. Naruto spent most of his time doing endurance training to further expand his chakra stores, and once or twice sought out Kakashi for information on how to better handle his clones during combat. Before long winter had come and gone, leaving more seasoned 11-year-olds in its wake. Sasuke occasionally brought up Naruto's transformation when they were alone, but eventually stopped asking after the last time the blonde got upset over the issue. He would find out one day, he was sure, and Naruto had given him space when he had needed it. Since the incident Naruto had decided a change in wardrobe was in order. He kept the indigo cloth wrap on his forehead, but he had outgrown most of his t-shirts and shorts by now. Iruka had taken him shopping after he was released from the hospital to pick up new clothes. More often than not Naruto could be seen sporting a dark gray shirt with a thick, black sleeveless coat that reached down to his shins, usually worn open in the front. He kept the cargo shorts, only changing to color to one less bright, varying between black and dark blue. He had been unsure of the change for a few days until he asked Hinata's opinion. For some reason her stammering and blushing was enough confirmation for him. Hinata seemed more and more stressed as their 5th year came to a close, though neither Sasuke nor Naruto could pinpoint why. She never spoke of her personal life or family, so they were both left fairly clueless, not that Sasuke cared much to find out. Naruto, though, fretted over it constantly, finally breaking it to Iruka on the first day of summer. Iruka-sensei, I can't figure out why Hinata-chan is so weird lately. She's more stressed than usual and won't tell me why. She also looks redder than usual, but she doesn't have a fever. Iruka had a few guesses, but he allowed Naruto to continue his rant. And I don't know why, but it bothers me when she looks upset. I mean, it bothers me when Sasuke's upset too, but he's always sorta upset, but still it's not the same. I just want to fix it, but I don't know how. And Naruto. Iruka started with the smallest of devious smiles. You like Hinata, don't you? Naruto blinked back at him and laughed, like it was a silly question. Of course I do, sensei, we've been friends for 5 years. No, really listen to the question this time. You like Hinata, don't you? He emphasized the words slowly, carefully. It took much longer than he would have liked, but gradually Naruto's face reddened and he wrinkled his nose. Yep. No way, Iruka-sensei. She's my best friend. Well, one of my best friends. I can't like my best friend like that. The idea was absolutely absurd to him. Why not? The unanswerable question had stopped the boy dead in his tracks. He was so adamant about his inability to think about Hinata that way, but had no idea why. Because we're just friends. What does this have to do with Hinata-chan acting weird, sensei? He looked up at Iruka crossly, his face still a bit red. Oh, maybe nothing. Maybe everything, too. I can't say I know, Iruka said mysteriously, giving Naruto a small nudge as he walked past. For some reason Naruto felt even more confused and helpless than before. Why did it matter if he liked Hinata? Not that he did. They were just friends. But, he sighed. Just another thing to think about. Maybe an answer would come during the summer sometime. It didn't. Chapter 5. Genin. Yes, Hokage-sama. The Kyuubi's chakra was sensed nearly 50 kilometers away from the point of origin, although it seemed to be a small flux. To avoid panic, a statement was released indicating that we were testing a powerful jutsu in Training Ground 10 that day. Ibiki's interrogation of the offending Chunin revealed that they had attacked and provoked Uzumaki Naruto and his classmates. It is also clear that Mizuki told the boy of his role as the Kyuubi's vessel, though it is unclear whether or not the other 2 children were present for the explanation. By their accounts, it seems unlikely. Thank you for the report. You are dismissed. The messenger bowed respectfully before departing, leaving the Sandaime and Iruka alone in the office once again. It had been 3 days since the attempt on Naruto's life, as well as the lives of his friends. How is he doing? He asked tiredly, setting his signature pipe down with a sigh. He's recovering fast, thankfully. He's always seemed to heal from his injuries quickly. I hate to admit it, but the Kyuubi probably saved his life. Nobody else could have survived in his condition. Iruka tried his hand at a laugh, but it came out hollow and unconvincing. My advisors, as well as the village council, Hiruzen began hesitantly, not sure if the information was appropriate to reveal to the instructor, have recommended that Naruto be detained until further notice. They believe him to be a danger to the village. That's absurd. Iruka was on his feet without realizing it. By all accounts, he was backed into a corner, and if he hadn't used the demon's chakra, he would have died. Not just him, but Hinata and Sasuke as well. What kind of incompetent? The Sandaime held up a hand, a tiny smirk quirking at his lips. I am of the same opinion, Iruka. I would not allow Naruto to suffer for something out of his control, and especially not when his actions saved the lives of 2 other students. I'm surprised that certain parties voted the way they did, in light of that information. A frown made the elderly Hokage seem even older than usual. They both knew who it was that he referred to, Hyuga Hiyashi. In any event, there was one action I could not prevent, nor did I object to. While Naruto remains in Konoha, he will be monitored by Anbu agents who have sealing capabilities, both to ensure his safety and to contain him should there be another incident. Iruka nodded. Even if he didn't like it, it was a reasonable demand. Hokage-sama, I'm not sure what to do, Iruka started, sounding worried and much less formal. If he knows about the Kyuubi now, I don't know what he'll think of me. I'm not sure if I can talk to him about it if he asks. And according to your law, now that he knows the truth he can tell anybody he pleases. To his surprise, the Sandaime chuckled and was just smiling at him, shaking his head. Iruka, I'm glad you're finding out what it is to be a parent. The Chunin blinked before flushing slightly. The boy will have tough choices ahead, and now that he does know the truth, things will only get harder for him. It's too late to wonder if the law of secrecy I imposed did more harm than good, but as his guardian you must decide what to do from here on out. As a humble suggestion from an old man, he continued with a twinkle in his eyes, just spend as much time with him as you can, while you can. Iruka thought over the Hokage's words on the way back to the hospital, and nearly every day afterwards. The time was quickly approaching when Naruto would become a genin, and then he and his friends would be off performing missions for the village with a new teacher. This final year would be the last Iruka had, and he intended to take the Sandaime's advice. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Sasuke sat alone on a bench in the afternoon sunlight, looking down at his repaired hand. It had been almost a year since Mizuki had damaged it, and although it had healed completely long ago, it served as a permanent reminder to him. I'm weak. The thought caused his scowl to deepen and he clenched his fist. I'm weak. I'll never kill Itachi like this. His brother had been a genius, of course, but it made no difference to him. No matter how hard he trained, no matter the effort he put into it, the fact remained. He needed to get stronger. Naruto had insisted years before that he would kill Itachi eventually, the right way, but that way wasn't fast enough. Every day his rage inside seemed to grow, festering and spreading like a blight. The only way to ignore it was to exert himself to exhaustion, but it only served as a distraction. I need more power. Something. Like what Naruto has. Why does he have it? Where did it come from? And why is it a secret? Sasuke had thought about such things before, and it only brought about increased frustration. It had also caused him to grow spiteful towards his friend. Yo, Sasuke. The familiar voice hailed from Naruto, walking towards him with Hinata at his side, as usual. Something wrong. They stopped a few meters away, the blonde's hands moving to cup the back of his head like they often did when he was curious or embarrassed. Nothing really, Sasuke replied, sounding a little annoyed even to himself. Just wondering if you want to tell us about your weird secret power yet. At the sight of Naruto's grimace, he adopted a lighter tone. Look, I know you don't want to talk about it. But if you can teach us how to. I can't, Naruto responded flatly, looking off to the side uncomfortably. It's not something. I was just born with it all right. I didn't ask for it. Sasuke could tell that he was trying not to get upset, but pushing the issue would eventually make his friend snap. Well, that answers that, I guess. Still. Alright. Whatever, sorry. Sasuke's apology came off a touch insincere, though only Hinata seemed to notice. She wouldn't say anything, however. I need to get stronger or I'll never defeat Itachi. That's all. It was one of the rare times that the boy opened up to his friends, and they were not about to miss the opportunity. Sasuke, you're better than either of us when it comes to offensive ninjutsu, your taijutsu is great, and none of us can compete when it comes to handling ranged weapons. Naruto's encouraging response was instant, bouncing back from the gloomy topic like nothing had happened. Everything he said was true as well, a notion echoed by Hinata. Anyo. Iruka-sensei said that you're better than most Chunin with your shuriken control, Sasuke-san. And besides us, nobody in the class can beat you in sparring. We're not even genin yet. Unfortunately, it was only her last words that Sasuke seemed to latch onto. It doesn't matter what rank we are, the Uchiha nearly growled, trying not to glare at the girl. And being the top of the class, better than Chunin. None of that matters. Itachi was an Anbu captain by the time he was 13. I'm nothing compared to him. If Naruto didn't know better, he could have sworn that he had seen tears in Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke, never mind. I have some things to take care of today, so I can't train. I'll see you tomorrow. Without waiting for a response, he stood and leapt away, escaping over the treetops while his friends stood in silence, watching. I'm worried about him, Naruto-kun, Hinata said quietly, fidgeting with the hem of her coat. She jumped as she felt a hand on her shoulder, looking up to find Naruto smiling in the way he always did to try to cheer her up. The same grin also managed to summon a blush every time. Don't worry, Hinata-chan. You know how Sasuke can be. Besides, he continued, voice taking on a more serious tone, I understand where he's coming from, just like you do. We just need to help him as best we can, and everything will work out, right? While his proximity made her a tad lightheaded, and his words were comforting in a way, she was doubtful. But what if we don't get put on the same team? Oh, or what if I hold us back, or? Hinata stopped mid-sentence, looking affronted and steadily turning a darker shade of pink. Naruto was laughing, and what's worse, he was laughing at her. Tears started to well up before he waved both hands in front of him, breathing deeply and apologizing. Sorry. He brought both hands together in front of him as if begging her forgiveness. I didn't mean to laugh, Hinata-chan, but I just think it's funny that you think you'd hold us back. Her distress slowly turned into confusion. What was he talking about? Sasuke and I would be a mess without you here to help us with our chakra control, and without you to help us work on our speed, we'd be years behind in taijutsu training. We've been friends for 5 years, so you'd better take my word for it when I say you're the best. Naruto's broad grin faded when he saw that Hinata was very red in the face, much more so than he ever remembered. Hey, are you feeling okay? He asked worriedly, hand rising to touch her forehead to check for a fever. Hinata nearly fainted. I'm fine, she stammered, shuffling back a few steps. Her heel caught on a loose stone and she stumbled backwards with a squeak, her arms flailing for balance. Naruto stepped forward quickly, catching her hand with an embarrassed look on his face. Sorry, he said sincerely, a tint of red rising to his cheeks as he helped his friend regain her balance. Come on, let's head to Ichiraku's before training. Half-priced ramen today. Before she could object. Not that she wanted to. Naruto was dashing towards his favorite restaurant with Hinata in tow, her hand still grasped firmly in his own. Her face was on fire the whole way, and Ayame's incessant teasing did little to help the poor girl after they had arrived. Asterisk. The teams have already been decided. Kiba asked incredulously, Akamaru echoing his master's concern with a few barks. We're still months away from graduation. It was the middle of February, and Iruka had just made the announcement that teams were already mostly formed. There were still 30 students in the class, but half of them had been replaced over the course of the nearly 6 years of study. Only those truly fit to become ninja could graduate, and according to their teacher the process was sort of a formality anyway. Those that still remained had what it took. That's correct. Assuming we have no dropouts and nobody fails the graduation exam, we will have 10 three-man teams. You will be separated into groups that complement your skills in some cases, and in others you will be placed in a team where you will be filling a specific role. Before any of that, however, the potential for teamwork is first and foremost. As genin you will begin taking on D-rank missions that carry little to no risk. However, eventually you will go on C-rank, and on rare occasions B-rank, missions. On these you will often find yourselves in situations where you must trust your team implicitly, and teamwork will be of the utmost importance. A lack of trust and teamwork will kill you and your allies. Iruka allowed his statement to sink in for a moment before continuing. His students had spent the last 5 years training and maturing, it was time to become adults. Sensei, when do we find out which team we're on? The question came from Sakura, who seemed to be eyeing Sasuke worriedly. Ino rolled her eyes at the pink-haired girl. Right after you graduate. We will have one final day of class wherein you all will be assigned your teams and new instructors. And before you ask, he smirked, giving Sakura and Ino a wry look, you may not request to be on anybody else's team, nor are you allowed to change teams once you're on one. I expect you all to work hard with you assigned teams, understood? A chorus of, yes, sensei, brought a nod from Iruka, who then led them to the yard for weapons training. One day I'll be able to manage a Fuma shuriken like you, Sasuke. Naruto sighed as his friend's weapon sliced through the centers of 3 targets in an arch, looping around to embed itself into another only an arm's length from Sasuke. It seemed the Uchiha had a natural talent not only for fire techniques, but for controlling unconventional ninja tools as well. Just takes practice, he grunted, not feeling the modesty that he communicated. He had long since graduated the conventional kunai and shuriken that the rest of the class seemed stuck with. At least a handful, including his friends, had managed to become halfway proficient with a wider variety of weaponry. Anyway, you guys think we'll be on a team together? He yanked the blade from its lodging point, flicking his wrist to fold it back before handing it to Naruto. You bet. Naruto responded confidently, taking aim and flipping the weapon open again. His throwing technique was good, but his aim was off. The first target was hit cleanly, but the second only lost an arm, and the third was missed entirely. He cursed and leapt to recover the shuriken in midair so that it wouldn't pass right over their heads. He caught it deftly in the center circle, muttering to himself as he dug it into the ground to stop the spinning. Maybe I'll get better at this before then. I think it's likely, Hinata offered, her nervous habit already showing itself. Iruka-sensei said we would be placed together based on teamwork, so I think. Probably. She trailed off, the lack of confidence in her own statement causing her words to fail. Sasuke just shrugged. Naruto, however, continued his show of confidence. Come on, who here has worked together as long as we have? Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji have been together longer, Sasuke pointed out. I think their parents are all friends or something. Kiba and Shino seem to get along. I think, and Sakura hangs around them sometimes. Well, I bet they'll be on teams together like we'll be, Naruto continued, unconcerned. He tried his hand at another throw with similar results. He scowled. I mean, even if we're on different teams it'll be okay, right? Whenever we're in town we'll still meet up and train together and stuff. Plus that'll be 3 pretty strong teams, huh? His friends could tell that he was pushing the limits of his own optimism, but they didn't interrupt. It was hard to deflate Naruto's enthusiasm, even if it was forced. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I have requested you be placed on a team with the Uchiha and the Aburame. Their skills will supplement yours best. Hiyashi's icy gaze met the impassive features of his eldest daughter. She had learned well over the years to keep emotion from her face. He waited for her acknowledgement, but it didn't come. Our family has great influence over the village, including the academy. Still nothing. You should be grateful for my benevolence on your behalf. Hinata had begun quivering very slightly. I want to stay with my friends, she whispered, so meekly that Hiyashi thought he must have imagined it. He must have. Hinata would never dare question him. What did you say? He asked in a falsely calm tone. His rising fury betrayed the facade. I said I want to stay with my friends, father. Her voice was more solid now, confident. Both of them. Despite the iron will she had forced upon herself, she dared not mention Naruto by name. Her father was no fool, however. It was not often her father displayed any emotion, even if he did seem to come across as perpetually harsh. But his daughter, the heiress to the Hyuga clan, had just openly denied him. The only time she had felt killing intent stronger had been in the woods with Naruto. Hyuga Hinata, he stated slowly as he stood, stepping purposefully towards his kneeling daughter. For years I have invested in your training. Another step seemed to shake the floor. For years I have tried to rid you of your pathetic weaknesses. The entire room felt heavy now, and Hinata's breathing quickened. For years I have held out for the day you would be worthy of your birthright. And for what? In a single motion she was against the wall, pinned by a hand gripped about her throat. She gasped and grabbed at his hand, feet desperately kicking against the wall, trying to find a foothold. You refuse my kindness. You rebuke my advice. You allow your younger sister to surpass you. You are worthless. As if those words were the last he intended to speak to her, Hiyashi tossed his coughing daughter to the ground, disgusted. Get out. Naruto. She choked, struggling to her feet. Her father turned back to her, eyes widening in wonder. Not only had she defied him, but she sought to speak out of her place also. What a waste of blood. What about the demon child? He spat, eyes burning. He's not. Like you said, father. Hinata cursed herself for not being stronger. She wished she could defend her friend, the one person that gave her courage, that made her feel even the slightest bit comfortable being herself. But she could barely string a sentence together in the presence of the clan leader. Even if she was a failure, even if she didn't deserve to be Naruto's friend, she wouldn't allow him to be looked down on like that. Hiashi merely stood, stiff, staring down at his daughter. I see the demon has gotten to you too, daughter, he said coldly, sneering. That child should have been killed 12 years ago when. Hiashi ground his teeth, growling at nothing before sweeping out of the audience chamber, but not before one last contemptuous note. Until you prove yourself worthy of the Hyuga name, do not return to this compound. Trash does not belong in my family. Hinata sat very still, unblinking, staring at the wall with tears flowing freely down her face. She felt empty, like all of her being had just been taken from her. Every dream and aspiration lay shattered on the floor in front of her. Her father had finally disowned her completely. Long ago Hanabi had been named the new successor as a result of Hinata's failures, but never had she imagined Hiashi would cast her out. Her mind was blank even as she wandered from the Hyuga estate, a chilled wind biting at her pale face. It was a bitter, cold night. Hinata wandered the streets aimlessly, as if searching for herself until dawn's first light crested the walls of the konoha. Only then did reality set in, only then did she realize how alone she was. Then the tears came, in a back alley near the center of village. It felt like they might never stop. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Hinata-chan. Naruto hesitated, glancing at Sasuke before looking back at her. Her clothes were rumpled and dirty, and although neither of them would say it, she smelled like it had been days since her last proper bath. 3 days earlier she had come to class looking exhausted, her eyes red with dark circles underneath. She had not said a word the entire day. Since then it had been difficult to get even a nod out of the girl. I know I ask a lot, but are you okay? As usual, no response. She just stared blankly at the desk in front of her. Naruto. Sasuke, Iruka said sharply from below. The two in question blinked and looked down at their instructor. The class was empty. They had been dismissed for the day. Please head home. They both glanced down at Hinata, but after a hard look from Iruka they both muttered apologies and stalked off. Naruto stopped at the doorway, biting his lip and looking from Iruka to Hinata twice before exiting quickly. Iruka sighed, walking slowly to the desk one step down from theirs. He sat slowly, scratching the back of his head. Hinata, he started gently, not sure how to delicately navigate the topic. Will you tell me what's going on, please? She remained silent, showing no sign that Iruka had even been heard. Hinata, he said again clearly, a little louder. Finally, he reached up, prodded her right in the center of her forehead, enunciating each part of her name separately. Hinata. Why yes. Finally. The girl looked confused, as if she had no idea how she had gotten there. Will you tell me what's going on, please? And nothing. Sensei. Hinata blinked several times blearily, looking even more tired now that she had been brought to. Hinata, your friends may not ask you because they don't know how, but don't try to lie to your teacher. I've been getting to know you for nearly 6 years, too, and I can tell when one of my students hasn't slept for days and looks like she's been living on the streets. She quavered visibly, biting her lip. Now, I'll only ask you one more time. What's going on? For a long moment she stared at him, tears brimming, and for a time he thought she might not answer. Then, all at once, she burst into tears and began stammering, unable to form coherent sentences through it all. Iruka awkwardly patted her shoulder, trying to calm her down. Whatever he had expected from the normally reserved girl, it had not been this. He waited to see if the flow would stop on its own before speaking gently. Hey now, calm down. I'm not mad at you. Just take it slow, and explain from the beginning, alright? As Hinata gradually calmed enough to begin her story, Iruka moved to sit next to her in Naruto's usual seat. The Chunin had thought, at one time, that he could not have held greater distaste for Hyuga Hiashi. He was sorely mistaken. As Hinata stuttered through her heartbreaking tale, Iruka had to squeeze his hands together to prevent them from shaking. He was ready to spit fire before she even filled him in on the last 3 days. You've been living on the streets for 3 nights? He asked slowly, carefully. If he spoke too fast, he was afraid that he might explode. Her miserable nod confirmed this had been the case. Hinata, why didn't you tell anybody? She didn't respond, and only seemed to shrink into her chair like she had some fear of being reprimanded. Iruka shook his head. This wasn't the way to help. Come on, he sighed, clicking his tongue and standing up. Hinata didn't move. She just sat there, looking up at him blankly. You're coming home with me. I won't have my students staying out on the streets. You're going to stay with me until I can find you a place on your own. Despite her weak protests, he managed to get her out of the classroom and following him slowly back to the apartment. Sensei, I see can't, she murmured, sobs threatening to take her again. I'll just be an inconvenience. I'll be trouble for you and I'm not worth. You can, because I said so. You're not trouble, or an inconvenience, and you're worth more than what your damn father thinks, that's for sure. The words had left his mouth before he could think about them, accompanied by an angry curse shortly thereafter. Hinata's eyes went wide, causing a few tears to streak down her dirtied cheeks. Sorry, Hinata, he said softly, trying to smile. I promise, it's all right. Just do it as a favor to me, okay? Her eyes returned to the ground, and a full minute must have passed before she nodded. As they walked in silence, Iruka seriously considered an attempt on Hiyashi's life like he had years before. As the door clicked closed behind them, Naruto came trotting around the corner. When he spotted Hinata, his eyes went wide, the broadest grin appearing on his face. As his mouth opened to say something, however, Iruka held up his hand and shook his head. The boy blinked, glancing from the obviously downtrodden girl back to his teacher. He nodded slowly, backing up to let them pass. In short order, Iruka had drawn a hot bath and handed Hinata a towel and the smallest change of clothes he could find, likely some of Naruto's old garments. She merely nodded the whole time, staring at the floor. For a while after her teacher left, she stood by the closed door, mind working slowly through what he had said. But she was too tired to work through it. Her body ached, her eyes hurt, and everything felt fuzzy. Worst of all, she still felt empty. Nearly an hour later she emerged from the bathroom, cleansed of all but the worst of her grime. But such mire took more than a bath to purify. Some time later Iruka found her standing there, not sure where to go or what to do. He gently coaxed her to a simple, clean bedroom and said something she couldn't understand. Something about sleeping, maybe, and Naruto had been mentioned somewhere. All her mind registered was the bed, onto which she crawled as soon as the door was closed. After 3 days of no sleep, 3 days of emotional strain and pain, 3 days of waking nightmares, 3 days of repeating her father's words over and over in her head, 3 days of crying for hours on end, 3 days of contemplating things no person should ever have to consider. After 3 long days, Hinata slept. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Everything felt oddly warm and soft, and for a long time Hinata stayed very still, not wanting to open her eyes and bring the respite to an end. It took quite a while for her to realize she was neither at the Hyuga estate, nor somewhere outside. The realization caused her eyes to snap open with a soft gasp. A rush of muddled memories flooded in, and she sat up with a start, eyes looking wildly around the room. Where? It was still dark outside, the light from a crescent moon trickling into the small bedroom through a window across the room. Hinata bit her lip, remembering vaguely that Iruka had brought her back to his home and had her clean up before giving her the bedroom. I can't believe I let myself be such an inconvenience. She thought miserably, burying her face in her knees and trying not to cry again. All I do is cry and get in the way. I should leave before. She blinked, realizing the clothes she had on were not her own, but they seemed strangely familiar. Naruto-kun's. Her feeling of shame quickly turned into embarrassment, cheeks flushing at the realization that she now wore a pair of baggy tan cargo shorts and a loose gray t-shirt, the same clothes Naruto had worn up until the year before. Hinata gathered herself mentally, taking in a deep breath and exhaling slowly. I'll just leave a note and some money for Iruka-sensei for taking care of me. I can't stay here. With that thought placed firmly in her mind, she swept her feet off the side of the bed, prepared to stand. She blinked, eyes drawn to the bedside table. A plate of onigiri sat next to the reading light, with a note leaned against it containing Iruka's handwriting. Naruto thought you might be hungry when you woke up, so we made these for you. Itadakimasu. She couldn't hold back the tears anymore. A fresh wave hit her hard and she curled back up on the bed, not knowing what to do with herself. But these tears felt different. For some reason she didn't feel sad or hurt, but strangely warm. It was a difficult sensation to grapple with. Crying was an action she was used to, but this felt different for some reason, almost like it was good. After a few minutes of getting a hold of herself again, Hinata sat back up, wiping tears from her face. Her stomach grumbled and she looked at the plate again, feeling guilty. But Iruka had made it for her, and she might feel worse for not eating it. Another grumble convinced her. The door opened quietly, for which Hinata was grateful. She glanced worriedly both ways down the hall, biting her lip again before stepping out silently. The apartment was small but clean, and very neat. It took only a few seconds to find the front door. From there all she needed was a pencil and paper. As she passed by the living room, however, she froze, eyes going wide as she realized the one thing she had neglected to consider. She had even seen his name right in front of her and not registered it. Naruto lived with Iruka. Naruto's back was to her as he continued his very early morning exercises, doing pull-ups on a bar hanging from the ceiling. He must have been distracted by something, or just very into his workout, because it took him a while to notice Hinata's presence. Her face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and fear, and it was already several shades of red into its coloring. It was bad enough that she was in Naruto's living room, but she was now watching him exercise like some stalker. The fact that he wasn't wearing a shirt didn't help much, either. When he did finally realize she was there, he blinked, letting himself drop to the ground. As he turned, the first thing she noticed was his broad smile, as welcoming and friendly as it always was. "Morning, Hinata-chan," he whispered loudly, picking up a towel to wipe away the accumulated sweat. He had apparently been at it for a while. "I hope you slept okay. My bed can be kinda uncomfortable." Naruto grinned sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck with one hand. It was then that Hinata noticed the makeshift bedding that had been set up on the couch, along with a pile of clothes that could only belong to Naruto sitting nearby. Anyo," she stammered, fingers already pressing together. "Why your bed, Naruto-kun?" He shrugged and sat down on the couch, pulling a shirt over his head before responding. "Iruka-sensei said you needed to rest cause you were really tired, so I moved my stuff out of my room so you could sleep better." He blinked as Hinata looked like she was about to cry, a few sniffs coming about before Naruto jumped up and waved his hands in front of him. No, it's really okay. Iruka-sensei's couch is really comfortable, and I always exercise here in the morning anyway, and," he was cut off as Hinata collided with him, knocking him back onto the couch with a soft grunt. For a very long moment Naruto sat very still, both incredibly confused and unbelievably awkward. Hinata's face was buried in his chest, her fingers clutching at the fabric of his shirt. She was shuddering and, thinking his friend was cold, he wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He had seen somebody do that once. A very warm feeling sprung up in his chest, and his face felt a little hot. Hinata-chan." She shook her head against his chest, and he stopped. What was he supposed to do? Iruka hadn't said anything about this when he explained things about girls. Finally, to his great relief, Hinata spoke, though it was so quiet he had to lean down a little to hear. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun," she sniffed, her voice muffled by his shirt. Despite the burning shame and terrible feeling of inadequacy she felt, it felt nice to just be there. She wanted to talk about how she was feeling, and why she was crying, and many things, but the words wouldn't come. Part of it had to do with her own confusion. So much had happened in such a short time, and Iruka and Naruto were being so kind to her. It was too much to process. "You don't have to be sorry, Hinata-chan," Naruto said quietly, sounding strangely somber rather than his usual elated self. He didn't even seem uncomfortable or awkward. Hinata wanted to raise her head, but she didn't think herself capable of meeting his gaze. "Iruka-sensei wouldn't tell me what happened, but I knew something was wrong for a few days." "You don't have to tell me," he continued quickly, as if worried he might have offended her. But you can stay here as long as you want to. Iruka-sensei said it was okay. I really don't mind sleeping on the couch. I promise. I'll just be a burden. She mumbled, fingers tightening on his shirt. No you won't. Naruto said with such confidence that it caused her to finally raise her head, red-rimmed eyes examining his bright blues. He wasn't lying. Something her father had drilled in his children over the years was the ability to read people, and although Naruto rarely deceived anybody, she had trouble accepting his straight honesty. Her confused expression drew a smirk from the boy. Why would you think that? Iruka-sensei invited you here and said you can stay, which means you're welcome here, and he must want you here, right? And I want you here too, Hinata-chan. He was just telling the truth, but for some reason it made him feel squirmy inside his stomach. Hinata blinked several times, processing what Naruto had just told her in what felt like slow motion. Welcome here. The notion was alien to her. Wanted here. Naruto-kun wants me here. The color slowly began to creep into her cheeks. It felt wrong. The last time she had felt welcome or wanted anywhere was with her mother, who had long since passed away. Since then only self-doubt and failure had been her company. But now, she didn't dare allow herself to step fully through the door of hope. But maybe just taking a look through wouldn't be too bad. She lowered her head back to his chest before he could ask if she was feeling okay again. A slow, silent nod indicated that she understood. And then came the awkward silence. A few minutes eventually turned into half an hour of quiet, and while Naruto gradually got more comfortable with the situation, reality sank in for Hinata over time. If Iruka had not walked into the living room when he did, she was fairly positive that she would have exploded. Good morning you two, he yawned. The smallest mischievous smirk twitched his lips as Hinata sprang away from her friend, ending up next to him staring at the floor. Her face was so completely red that Iruka couldn't even bring himself to tease them. Naruto, can you come help me make breakfast? We're going to have omelets with rice and salmon today, he remarked cheerily. He turned to leave towards the kitchen, but as he reached the threshold Hinata's voice stopped him. Anyo, she started, on her feet as Iruka turned back. Hinata placed her arms at her sides and bowed, eyes squeezed closed and trying to get rid of the terrible flush. Thank you for welcoming me into your home, Iruka-sensei, she said with surprising clarity. Formalities were deeply ingrained in her from youth, largely thanks to her status. I will work hard to earn my keep and find a place to stay as soon as I can. Thank you, she repeated before straightening, looking awkward and out of place. Ah, Iruka began, slightly taken aback. He wasn't used to such formalities or what he considered to be flattering. No need to thank me, Hinata. You can stay here as long as you need to, so don't worry about it. She blinked at him but nodded, looking back at the floor and clutching the fringe of her shirt, which reminded him. Oh, and your clothes are clean and folded in the linen closet in the hall. We'll get you some more this weekend. With that he left the living room, whistling to himself as he began preparations for breakfast. Naruto stood and started to follow, stopping next to Hinata and nudging her with his elbow, making her jump a little. He grinned and put his hands behind his head. You can come help with breakfast after you change, if you want. Iruka-sensei said I have to learn how to cook, but I'm not very good at it. He made a face before trotting after their teacher, leaving Hinata to stare after them. More of those strange, good tears welled up, but she pushed them down, determined to make herself useful rather than feel sorry for herself. Hinata quickly located and changed into her normal clothes, chastising herself for making Iruka go out of his way to wash them for her. Despite her will to help, however, as she approached the kitchen she slowed, plagued with self-doubt. I shouldn't get in their way. Can you help me with cooking the salmon and setting the table, Hinata? Iruka asked kindly, giving her an encouraging smile, looking for all the world like a bigger version of Naruto. It made her wonder if her friend had inherited that smile. She nodded quickly, hurrying to help as her teacher had requested. He and Naruto bantered nearly the entire time, their antics making even Hinata smile a little. She surprised herself by giggling once when Naruto did a particularly interesting imitation of the Hokage. Naruto shot Iruka a quick grin while Hinata wasn't looking. His instructor winked back. Things would turn out okay, eventually. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Ready for the exam? Iruka asked as they walked towards the academy. It had been 3 months since Hinata had moved in, and although she was still quiet as ever, the girl seemed much less anxious these days. She walked a little straighter, made eye contact with her peers more often, and even spoke with less of a stutter. Iruka wasn't willing to take much credit for any of it, though, as far as he was concerned, just getting away from the Hyuga estate had helped Hinata more than anything he could have done. Yes, sensei, they both chimed, glancing at one another immediately after. Naruto grinned, and Hinata smiled demurely. Iruka raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment further. Those two had also grown closer in their friendship after living in close proximity for so long. Naruto still seemed a bit clueless about Hinata's feelings for him, but that was alright. He might realize it eventually. Or possibly not. It was the day of their final test, and although this would be the deciding moment for all of them, nobody seemed nervous. According to Iruka, though, those that remained were pretty much guaranteed to pass, and every one of them had mastered the 3 required jutsu. All of them had proven to be proficient with a variety of ninja tools. In their final year they had studied genjutsu and how to recognize it, though no practical test would be administered. In the end, the students weren't nervous because they had passed the most difficult part of the exam, surviving for 6 years at the academy. One by one they were called into a small side room that held Iruka, another proctor, and a table on top of which 30 forehead protectors, Hitai 8, sat. Each had a metal guard engraved with the symbol of a konoha shinobi and were to be presented to a student when they passed the test. Of the 3 friends, Sasuke was called in first. Looking as unconcerned as always, he more or less ignored Naruto's cheer for him to kick some ass and Hinata's small smile. He knew he would pass, as did the rest of the class. And, as expected, he returned minutes later wearing his new headband. What a joke, he muttered as he sat back down, leaning on the desk and staring out the window. Hinata glanced at Naruto, looking a bit worried, though more for their friend's state of mind than the upcoming test. Hyuga Hinata, the proctor called, making her jump and swallow. When she looked back to Naruto, he gave her a big smile and placed a hand on her arm. Hinata was fairly sure that he could do that a dozen times a day and she would still flush every time. She nodded and smiled back before standing and making her way to the testing room. Although she became fairly nervous standing in front of the instructors, Iruka's confident nod eased the tension somewhat. A short time later, Hinata emerged from the room as well, her Hitai 8 tied around her neck. She tried not to appear overtly pleased or accomplished. Sasuke had been right, in a way. They had learned the jutsus years before, after all. Naruto, though, was ecstatic enough for both of them, giving a rousing cheer and a thumbs up as soon as she came through the door. Hinata rushed back to her seat so that the rest of the class couldn't get an eyeful of her reddened features. Uzumaki Naruto. The boy nearly jumped out of his seat in excitement. This was it. His first step to becoming Hokage. It may not mean much to the rest of his classmates, but he had worked hard over the last 6 years to accomplish his first, smaller goal, on the road to Hokage. He bounded down the stairs, turning just before exiting the room to give Hinata and Sasuke another thumbs up. She did her best to give an encouraging smile and nod, while the Uchiha merely glared at nothing outside. Alright, Naruto, this should be quick. Please perform a Henge no Jutsu, you can transform into anything you'd like. Iruka nodded at his fellow Chunin's words, waiting for his student. Yes, sensei. Henge no Jutsu, he said clearly. A puff of smoke enveloped him for a moment before revealing a perfect copy of Iruka standing in front of them, holding up 2 fingers and grinning broadly. Very good. Next. Kawarimi no Jutsu please. Naruto nodded again, disappearing in a puff of smoke, a section of a log falling to the ground with a dull thud where he had just been standing. Iruka and the proctor glanced around before noticing the blonde standing behind them. Very good. Lastly, perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, please. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto murmured, making sure to focus only enough chakra to form one clone. The copy appeared next to him, scratching the back of his head and looking a little bored. The proctor seemed impressed, but not quite enthusiastic. I don't mean to split hairs here, but as impressive as a Kage Bunshin is at your age, the test requires you perform the Bunshin no Jutsu to pass, the stranger began, though Iruka cut in before he could continue the objection. Actually, the rules of the exam state that a Bunshin must be procured. A Kage Bunshin falls into that category. Not to mention the latter jutsu is much more useful than a simple Bunshin. Iruka smiled sweetly at the other proctor, who grunted and tried not to openly show contempt for Naruto. Alright, good enough. You pass. Get a forehead protector and go back to your seat. He marked something on his clipboard as Naruto approached the table, muttering something under his breath about cheating. Congratulations, Naruto. Iruka smiled, holding the Hittite towards his student with no small amount of pride showing. You've earned it. If Naruto's grin was any bigger, his cheeks might have torn. He took the headband reverently, looking at it for a moment before lifting it to his forehead, tying it over the ever-present indigo wrap. This was it. He was finally a genin. Despite what everybody else had said, he had done it. He tried to control his gait as he left the testing chamber, but was running by the time he made it to the classroom door. He burst in just as Sakura was making her way down the stairs to take her exam. The glare she afforded him could not put a damper on his mood in the least. Yeah, he cheered, making half the class jump before glowering at the noise that Naruto was making. He didn't care, though. In one leap he made it to the top row, lifting Hinata from her chair and into a tight hug despite her alarmed sounds of protest. He put her down quickly, still smiling, but a bit more subdued now that he had gotten it out of his system. He turned to Sasuke and extended his fist, hoping for a returned gesture. The dark-haired boy eyed the hand dubiously before sighing, lifting his fist to bump his knuckles with Naruto unenthusiastically. That seemed to be enough for Naruto, however, as he sat back down afterwards and seemed to be radiating joy. After the last student returned from their test, the room went silent as Iruka entered with a stack of papers. All right everyone. Congratulations on passing your exams, but as I've said before, things will only get harder from here. You are all still new genin, and have much to learn. I have compiled the team lists and will now reveal the team assignments. Every student in the room had their eyes trained on their instructor, knowing that his decisions would shape their futures. Iruka paused for dramatic effect, smirking only slightly as he watched a few lean in. Ino and Sakura looked to be on the edge of their seats. For once Naruto seemed almost as nonchalant as Sasuke, though Hinata's index fingers were now pressed together, indicating her worry. The first 6 teams were assigned in short order. Nobody seemed too surprised or unhappy with the results. As Iruka had said months before, there were many factors behind putting a team together, and even if his decisions were unexpected, they would be respected nonetheless. Finally, he started on the 7th team. Next, the 7th group. Most of the remaining students, with the exception of the aforementioned 2 girls, seemed either uninterested or unworried, so his delays meant little now. Uzumaki Naruto. He started, remaining perfectly casual as the blonde boy perked up. Uchiha Sasuke. As his name was called, Sasuke barely moved, fingers folded in front of him as he stared at Iruka. It was obvious to the entire class who the third member of their team would be, but Naruto still sat on the edge of his seat, and Hinata closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer. Hyuga Hinata. She breathed a sigh of relief, and Naruto jumped up to celebrate again. Kiba, Shino, and Sakura were placed on a team together, as were Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji as teams 8 and 10 respectively. Ino and Sakura immediately lamented not being placed with their beloved Sasuke-kun, while the rest seemed comfortable enough with the choices. After letting them converse for a moment, Iruka drew their attention back to him. Your new Jonin instructors will be here at noon, and from then on you will be under their tutelage. I expect you to give them the same respect you have afforded me these past years. Best of luck, genin. Class dismissed. Iruka smiled as his students dispersed, most moving to their new groups to get acquainted, if they were not already, over lunch. He watched them go silently, giving Naruto and his friends a small wave as they exited, which 2 of them returned. You're all adults now. Best of luck Naruto, Hinata, Sasuke. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I wonder if the rest of the instructors are late. 2. Naruto pondered, leaning back in his seat between Hinata and Sasuke. They had been waiting since before noon, and it had been nearly a half an hour since then already. He hoped that their teacher wouldn't be lazy. Sorry I'm late, a familiar voice droned. All three looked around, blinking, before noticing the man sitting in the desk just behind them. He was tall, with his forehead protector lowered over one eye, and he wore a dark blue mask that covered everything below the bridge of his nose. His silver hair was spiked up and to the side, and despite its ostentatious appearance one might correctly assume that it actually grew that way. His overall attitude seemed bored, or at the very least overly relaxed. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto gasped. He had promised himself, and Iruka, that he would be respectful, but seeing the man that had taught him his favorite jutsu had caught him off guard. Not to mention, without him Naruto would never have been able to pass the genin exam. You look kind of familiar. Where have I seen you before? It was unclear if the man was being difficult or if he actually had forgotten the boy. Seeing as Naruto was a bit too infamous to forget, they bet on the prior. After feigning a struggle to recall, Kakashi shrugged. Oh well. Let's head outside to make our introductions. After settling on a terraced balcony, Kakashi leaning against the railing while his new students sat on the steps, he addressed them a little more formally. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I understand that you three go pretty far back, so we can skip part of the introduction. But just for my benefit, I'd like your names, hobbies, and your highest aspiration. If you'd like to start, Mr. Spiky Blonde. Naruto made a face, but obliged with a smirk. Uzumaki Naruto. My hobbies are training and trying different kinds of ramen at Ichiraku's. My dream is to be Hokage one day. I'll be the best there ever was. Kakashi quirked an eyebrow. Well, that's one you don't hear often. Understandable for a kid in his situation, though. Hyuga Hinata. At their teacher's nod she had continued the introductions, fighting not to let her self-consciousness get the better of her. Anyo. I enjoy pressing flowers and training to get stronger. My dream is. She stopped there, blinking at Kakashi. What was her dream? I'm not sure. Kakashi-sensei. Hinata bowed her head, embarrassed, staring at the ground. Again Kakashi raised an eyebrow. I suppose your dream can be to find a dream to work towards, he commented wryly before turning to the last member. Uchiha Sasuke. He was the reason that Kakashi had been assigned to the team. Last one. Uchiha Sasuke. Outside of training my hobbies aren't of much interest. My ambition is to kill a certain someone. His tone was flat, eyes hard. There was no doubt who he was referring to, and in that moment Kakashi had no doubt of his will to succeed in that endeavor. Well, it's nice to see some diversity in my team. Now, on to business. He pushed off of the railing, stretching with a sigh. Iruka-sensei was not allowed to share this information with you, but now that you're assigned a team it's time you learned. None of you are genin yet. As usual, 3 pairs of eyes blinked, confused. What do you mean sensei? We just passed our test. Naruto started, sounding not only perplexed but a little annoyed. The test is only meant to find out if you're able to become genin. Each jonin has the final say as to whether or not their students actually earn the title. By the end of this week, only 3 teams will remain from the original 10. The students that fail their new instructor's test will return to the academy. Any questions so far? Naruto and Hinata sat in stunned silence, while Sasuke merely glared. None of them dared ask if he was serious. Kakashi didn't seem like the type to joke around. Finally, Naruto spoke up, though it was not what any of them expected to hear. Only 2 other teams, Kakashi-sensei, he corrected, smirking confidently. Since we're definitely going to pass. Sasuke didn't move, but after a moment Hinata nodded, trying her best to show even a semblance of the confidence that her friend held. We'll see about that. Meet me at the 3rd training ground at 5, tomorrow morning. Our test is going to be survival training. He waved and started to walk off, though turned just before reaching the edge of the balcony. Oh, and don't eat any breakfast. Trust me, you won't want to. His one visible eye squinted in a way that made them think he was smiling before he was gone in a cloud of white smoke. Aj. Naruto groaned, falling onto his back. Why'd we have to get the crazy instructor? He sighed, scowling up at the clouds. From the way he talks, it's like he wants to fail us. Anyo. I think we'll do okay, Hinata offered timidly, not really feeling her own statement's attempted assurance. We're already a good team, right? They had begun practicing some maneuvers that year, at Iruka's suggestion. It had not been required for their grades, but he had mentioned it to the class as something to be prepared for. Hinata's right, Sasuke grunted, already walking off. We've been training together for years. It won't be a problem. Just like that, he was gone, apparently as unconcerned as he had been that morning about the genin exam. Naruto couldn't help but smile at his friends. Sasuke had gotten a lot more callous over the years, but he was still one of them. Yeah, you guys are right. Come on, Hinata. Let's go try some more tree climbing. I think I've almost got the technique down. Can we try walking on the river after that? I really want to. Naruto continued to chatter away as they walked together to their usual training spot. His demeanor calmed Hinata down some, like it always did, and the one-sided conversation never seemed to bother her. She suppressed a small smile. They would be fine after all. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Sensei. You're late again, Naruto teased half-heartedly. His team had arrived on time that morning, and it seemed none of them had eaten breakfast as directed. 2 hours had passed before Kakashi showed up, making a lame excuse about a cat crossing his path. Sorry again, you three. Now then, you all remembered to skip breakfast. They all nodded, Naruto with a little resentment showing through. Good. Now I can explain our exercise for the day. He pulled out an alarm clock and set it on one of 3 log posts in the middle of the clearing. He then pulled out 2 bells and held them up so that they were clearly visible. You have until noon to get these bells from me. Whoever fails to get a bell will not be given lunch, and will also fail my test. Naruto only glowered more, but Hinata simply blinked before offering an observation. Sensei. There are only 2 bells. Kakashi seemed to smile at the comment, which made her a bit uncomfortable. That is correct. Only 2 of you will be able to pass my test, and the third will return to the academy. He waited for Naruto to stop protesting and ignored Hinata's hurt expression. It's also possible that none of you will pass the test, meaning all 3 might return to the academy. So let me be very clear, he said calmly, tone silencing their objections. I expect you to use any means necessary to get these from me, including deadly force. Without waiting for them to interject, he hit the top of the clock, setting the alarm for noon. Ready. Begin. Sasuke and Hinata all but vanished into the woods surrounding the clearing, but to their surprise, and the quirked eyebrow of Kakashi, Naruto remained standing at the center of the clearing. He was looking at their instructor dubiously, trying to work out what was going on. Something told him that this was off. I don't believe you, he said finally, folding his arms. Kakashi blinked his eye, head cocked slightly to the side as he decided what to make of this brash youth. There's no way they'd let you send just one of us back to the academy. That doesn't make any sense. Iruka-sensei said that teams were always in 3s with one jonin instructor. You're no longer at the academy, Naruto. I make the rules here, and if I tell you that you are going back to the academy, you are. Kakashi stared back at Naruto lazily, fastening the 2 bells loosely on his belt. The boy clenched his fists, mind working through his options, before he vanished in a blur to join his comrades. What do we do? Hinata asked in a worried whisper, eyeing Kakashi through a gap in the trees. They had all suppressed their chakra so that it would be harder to sense them, something she had taught the other 2 how to do over the years. We need to focus on getting those bells, then we can figure it out, Sasuke said quietly, taking in the surroundings. Naruto nodded, but still seemed upset and distracted. We'll just run through our formations and maneuvers like we practiced. Remember. Don't hesitate to use force, like he said. If he wants us to really go for them we will, got it? They nodded again. Hinata activated her Byakugan and took a deep breath while her teammates got into position. She would worry about consequences later. Kakashi had drawn a small book from his belt pouch, a clearly adult-themed novel judging by the cover. Despite his relaxed appearance, he was completely tuned into his surroundings, waiting and calculating as he sensed the genin moving closer. One behind, One above, one at a distance. At least they're working together. Doden. Earth rupture. Hinata's jutsu crushed the ground below him, catching his feet as a fist of shuriken came flying from the side. Everything worked as he had anticipated, however. The weapon struck him directly, but a moment later he appeared behind Sasuke, the impaled log replacement clattering to the ground. Too slow, he muttered, hand already striking at the back of the boy's head. Except, he wasn't too slow. Sasuke had twisted at the last second, spinning for a hard kick as if he had expected Kakashi to appear there. The genin was forced to block, genuine surprise written on his hidden features. But he had no time for being impressed. He shoved Sasuke away, thrusting his book back into the back pocket. All right, no flirting paradise then, he sighed, readying himself for the next attack. He had yet to see Naruto, but he could feel the boy's chakra signature everywhere. Guess I got distracted. But this is impressive. A horde of Narutos had surrounded the clearing, all brandishing kunai and grinning at the genin. Even I couldn't make this many. I guess the reports about him were true. The clones were not incredibly coordinated, but they did show a surprising amount of sentience and awareness. As they charged, they came in formations, executing maneuvers in an attempt to back Kakashi towards the nearby river. It was a simple ploy to see through, and Kakashi instead fought the clones towards the three stumps. In no time they were all but cleared, only a handful left looking more than a little frustrated. Come now, you're going to have to try harder then. The genin was cut off as a fireball blasted from above him, forcing a dodge right into the path of a Fuma shuriken. Kakashi was not considered a legendary ninja for no reason, however. Rather than dodge, he caught the weapon deftly, tossing it back into the woods where he sensed Sasuke's chakra. However, a second shuriken was only a few meters from him already, having been hidden in the shadow of its predecessor. Ah, the shadow shuriken technique. The Uchiha boy shows some promise. Things did not go as expected as he reached for the next, however. Hinata had moved so fast that even he had a hard time tracking her movement. The girl bent forward calmly, allowing the weapon to pass mere centimeters from her head and into Kakashi's outstretched hand. Her hand was already outstretched, the tips of her fingers almost closed around one of the bells. Crap. He withdrew his hand at the last second and bent backwards, effectively drawing his belt out of reach and allowing the shuriken to fly over him instead. He pushed off of the ground hard, vaulting into the air and taking a moment to take in their positions. These kids mean business. It hasn't even been an hour yet. Then he blinked, and looked down. Naruto was falling away from him towards the ground, grinning broadly, both bells held between his fingers. When did he? Kakashi realized how he had been tricked a moment later, smacking himself in the forehead as he landed. You transformed one of your clones into the other shuriken, knowing that Hinata's attack would force me to dodge. Where did you three learn that? Naruto looked overly pleased with himself, while Sasuke just smirked and Hinata blushed deeply. We thought it up, Naruto proclaimed proudly, dangling the two bells from his fingertips. Sasuke's really good with shuriken, and he taught himself the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. Since I can make a lot of Kage Bunshin, it's easy to transform myself into a Fuma Shuriken without anyone noticing. Hinata's faster than both of us, so it was only natural she be the one to engage the target directly. He said it's a matter of factly that Kakashi couldn't help but shake his head and admit defeat. Well, I guess you won this round. But remember, only two of you can pass, he reminded them, and suddenly Sasuke's scowl returned, followed closely by Hinata's uncomfortable expression. Yeah, I know, Naruto said nonchalantly, tossing a bell to each side. His friends caught them automatically and stood staring at him, Sasuke looking nonplussed and Hinata horrified. You can pass them, and I'll go back to the academy. Naruto-kun. Hinata breathed, tears already welling in her eyes. You can't. You need. Hinata's right, Naruto, Sasuke said with a shrug, tossing his bell on the ground at Kakashi's feet. We're not going to let you go back to the academy by yourself. If you go, I'm going back too. His hands were already in his pockets, eyes on their instructor. He didn't seem the least bit concerned. Guys, come on, Naruto laughed, looking from one to the other. The final exam is easy. I can just take it again next year. No reason for you two to miss a year of experience if you don't have to. Hinata shook her head, in full agreement with Sasuke. She stepped forward, handing her bell to Kakashi with a polite bow before stepping back to her friends. Together, or not at all, she said quietly, fidgeting with her coat but looking determined. She rarely did anything with full confidence, but this was one time in her life she was very sure of herself. Being separated from Naruto was not an option. During the ordeal, Kakashi had watched silently, marveling at the phenomenon occurring before him. I suppose there's a first time for everything, he sighed, scratching the back of his neck as if embarrassed. After a moment he smiled. Or it looked like he was smiling, anyway. You all pass. They blinked, as stunned as he had expected. What, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked bluntly, unsure how they had gone from all failing to passing in an instant. I said that you all pass. This test was a test of your teamwork, not your combat or survival skills. They were blinking again, though it was Sasuke who questioned him this time. If it was a test of our teamwork, why didn't you pass us when Naruto got the bells from you? Accomplishing your mission objective is important. You're right, Kakashi relented, a twinkle appearing in his visible eye. Some might even argue that it's the most important part of being a ninja. However, he continued, leaning down so he could meet their eyes directly. It's important to follow the rules of our village, and especially my rules if I'm your teacher. However, there's a saying that goes along with that. Those who break the rules are scum. But those that don't take care of their friends are even worse than scum. While I didn't get to properly demonstrate the first part of that saying, you three have proven that you care about one another. You were all willing to return to the academy together so that you could remain a team, and for that, you passed. It took a moment for everything to register, but they got the message. Sasuke let out a haughty humph, while Hinata blushed and stared at the ground, pushing her index fingers together. Naruto simply cheered, looking quite the opposite of the serious youth that had challenged Kakashi on his rule earlier. This will be an interesting adventure with these three. And just like that, Team 7 was formed. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.